at 7 a.m. We'll just jump right in.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right. So the E update, so all the way forward.
Holding our breath, wait.
Holding your breath. So what I thought is I was gonna start with the west side of the city, go to the central area, then end with the east side, and then some data. So we have access to MLS, which is where all the home sales are reported. So I thought I'd bring up, now that we have 28 homes sold over on the west side. Here's just some information. We all know about how many permits the PDs allow. But for the average sold home on the west side, 3269 is the average square foot, and 518,193 is the average home sold price. So now you know. And if you apply our tax rate to the 518, that's about $24.85 a year. I have not included any PID information and TIF. This is just the DCAD stuff you can look up right now.
I'd be interested to know what the PID and TIF costs them. Those
So-
people
The
that
church
charge.
is 40%, right?
Look it up on DK.
It's on DCAT, this is
Yeah.
not?
The PID's not on DCAD.
I didn't think
but
it was.
but this is just stuff you can find on DCAD right now.
Oh,
This is not PID.
The PID itself is somewhere in a ballpark of about 2,000, 2,200 for, you know how the PID is based on like lot sizes, so if you get this lot size or this lot size or PID size, your PID amount is gonna be different. So it's somewhere in the ballpark of about 2,200 or so, undiscounted. There's a discount that would be applied to that as well.
Off the property, the total value?
if it's a homestead or something.
No, not homestead or senior, but the participation rate from the city also factors in.
40% rebate.
Oh,
Is that all, is that rebate always going to be there, or is it just for a certain amount of time?
It's
The life of the, okay.
What's the name of one of the streets out there?
Prescott. So
Place?
here, Prescott Place is a sold comp. Sold in 2018 for 530. DCAD total value was 505. So it does show you between what you sell your house and what DCAD has, there is wiggle room usually. 2822 square feet. So if you pull that address, it'll show you the estimated taxes just to the city, and then 14,282 to all jurisdictions, not including the PID. Just some quick facts of the residential market.
How many homes did you say have sold so far?
Only on MLS reported 28. That means
20.
people that use the MLS service, but you don't have to use MLS and then you don't have to report. So I only found 28.
Huh.
So Billingsley's secondary phase, that construction's been going south of the existing brickyard. So this is the water tower structure. So the southern portion, existing and expansion to the south, and at this particular address, we're estimating about $350,000 a year just to the city alone. And the reason I bring that up is just on this piece of land, that increment goes to the city each year. So that's a pretty significant number. When you think about not everyone loves multifamily, there is a piece for it in places, and it surely gives the city a lot of money. Their phase 2 is at the corner of Whittington. This is Whittington. And that's the one that looks a little bit different, phase 2. Right now, that's the estimated value of the project. The full value is not on DCAD because it's not completed. So we're estimating, CFP only estimated property tax was that, but it'll be much higher when it's finished. So the Billingsley's building good product, and they're bringing a lot to the tax rolls for us, and actually to all the jurisdictions, the school district the most. So Western Rim is the one that had the 1,100 multifamily units, which actually I don't mind behind an office building if you're gonna put it somewhere. So, but the potential property tax to us, if you kind of apply the same metrics with the Billingsley Class A multifamily, it could be up to $650,000 a year. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the TIF increment and all of that. I'm just saying this is what you could be collecting. So I put this slide here. I just I thought it's interesting. It shows the health of a market. If someone's willing to put money up and build a building with no tenant, it shows you they're willing to gamble that they're gonna get a tenant. And so we have 3 spec industrial on the west side. One of them got approved last week with the Billingsley Company, and that was one of these buildings. Sinlac and the other one were the Panatone that y'all have seen, because the Panatone came in June, and we had a lot of discussion for the Valley View one. Now, the Panatone Sinlac, which is across from our service center, that's actually tinted up now, which is great. But when they were building it, it was spec. So that just kind of shows you the health of the submarket for industrial right there. Hospitality, y'all have seen this slide before, so Holiday Inn and Suites and Candlewood Suites are open, but the others aren't fully open yet. Shops and Mustang Station. Okay, so Starwood Cafe, you may have heard, but you probably haven't heard from me, but Starwood Cafe did sign their lease, and it is a breakfast place. And they have 4 existing locations in North Dallas, like Frisco, Plano area. I've eaten there. It is good. You already know about Roots and Red Sticks and Cedar Creek and Cox Farms. Victoria's is the existing Victoria's on B Street. They were planning to leave. They called Western. They did a deal with Western, so they are going into the restaurant part.
What are they doing with the rest of their old facility?
Well, they don't own it, so they're just gonna leave.
And is
But you mean
the-
the banquet hall? They may keep that space, I don't know. But they just weren't happy where they were, and so they were gonna leave anyway.
As we discussed before, at least I am not happy with that. I think that's this was envisioned as a destination, and Victoria's, in my opinion, is not a destination. And it's this run-of-the-mill, average, mediocre Mexican food. And so I would say if we're even considering offering them an incentive, that we think real hard about that.
So we have the option to or not an executive session coming up, but that's a vote to take for each of the new ones. We're waiting on a coffee shop to come through and a burger restaurant. So then we can talk about the increment we can possibly share with these 4 new ones.
Are you gonna have concepts for what Victoria's might look like in the new space?
Yeah, Western asked them that their decor be different, so they don't have any concepts right now, but the decor just can't look like it does right now. That's what they asked them.
We don't have to treat each restaurant the same way. We can.
Never.
Okay.
You can give somebody nothing and you can give somebody everything. Just depends how much we have to. Okay, flipping over to the station area. This is just a map of some of the parcels that we still own. Now, of course, we own this and we own the parking lot, but this was the green grass that's not developed yet, assuming the building's gone, that we own. And then this is DART, has 0.6 acres. So in another slide, I'm going to talk about the RFQ process, but I just wanted you to keep in mind the holdings that we have right now.
Well, if you look at both pages, and one says summary, one says detail.
What?
That's Robert's own.
Oh, can't see you, but,
Yes.
Who owns that green space between, on the corner, yep,
here,
yep.
Don Williams owns this, and then Ray Halford owns this. So we don't own these 2 parcels.
We've been trying to get the corner, but price keeps going up.
Well, when I first called on this property about 6 years ago, it was $2 million, which was ridiculous with the valuation with the rent inside. Now it's 3.2. So, and obviously no one's bought it at that price. Don's willing to work with us and make a deal. He is just ready to do that right now. So I've told him, we want to do the RFQ process. We want to see what the market will bear for a larger development, and he can come in, he and Ray can come in and be a part of that.
But doesn't that make their value go up when we include their parcels not being owned in the RFQ? So now Don's piece is gonna be $3 million and the other guy's gonna be $5 million.
It just depends what the market will pay. I'm not including them in the RFQ at all.
Meaning that we don't own them, or doesn't it give value and credence to their properties because we own everything around, we're trying to do something?
Not necessarily, we'll build around them. I'm not including them in the RFQ. That's just for the open market. We don't own all the other pieces.
And they may respond to the RFQ and say, we've
Yeah.
got this parcel, and if we could control the rest of this, they're both developers.
And
So-
Don, he just got a new agent, right? I think I just saw a new sign go up.
Yeah, Don changed his agency. So this is the station area code, master plan 2012. Just to remind you of, obviously it doesn't have to be just like this, but this is kind of what Gateway had envisioned as what could be. So this has been existing on our website for a few years. So this is Valley View, and this is the 35 Service Road. And it does show a single tenant building right there. So we could check that off our box because we've got Starbucks.
Yeah, sure.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Yep.
And
Welcome.
Allison, don't forget,
Just keep bringing it up.
your map didn't show the AT&T building, so the RFQ will include AT&T property.
Have we got that? I thought that was up in the air.
Just being
We
recorded.
we have it under contract, and we've gone through phase 1 environmental, which surprisingly came out acceptable, so we don't have to go through phase 2. One issue that we have is timing. We don't have enough money to close it unless we go into the reserve
Are
fund.
we doing an executive session on this item? Is this recorded?
Yes, it is.
So,
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So what makes a place great? Let's talk about it. You're killing me. Sociability, uses and activities, comfort and image, access and linkage. There's a website called Project for Public Spaces that it's like we're planning people go that just want to volunteer and have all the time in the world to read stuff. It's a fantastic resource that shows you how to make a place special and different. And what they continually drive home is using layers of uses. So green space and a little bit of residential, a little bit of retail. If you have one dominating use, it's very boring, right? One dominating use of multifamily will eventually deteriorate in 30 years. But if you have enough different uses, you can keep making it special if you put some investment in. These are the things that the RFQ, we want to drive into the RFQ because developers are motivated by buildable area and cities are motivated differently. And so we've got to find a happy partnership. So these will be some of the things that we use as our criteria as I go through that RFQ process.
And we'll be sending them examples of some of these things, like really neat things we're doing, like in Portland and in Boston. Okay.
Yeah. So my vision for the RFQ is, so once we finalize any pending acquisitions in the area, then we'll have the ability to go out with all the parcels that we own at that point. And so here's what we were thinking. The planning and ED team would partner to write the criteria, because a lot of the criteria is land use language. I put the MOU with DART because Carrollton had 16 acres at one of their DART stations. DART also had 16 acres, so they partnered to do a 32-acre RFQ years ago. They only have 0.6 acres here, but we did meet with them last year, and they did mention if you bring someone to the table, we're willing to entertain the possibility of some higher and better use on our parking lot, considering it still has parking on the ground floor. So it's a piece of the pie. So finalizing pending acquisitions in station area. ED department will bring RFQ to council before it's finalized. And then we can submit it and review it and pick a partner. And these are just some stock images that I found from mixed-use developments. We don't have a lot of land, but if you do consider, just a consideration of abandoning Carrick, making Pike your primary drive into, maybe you can grab some in the parking lot of the Star Center and reallocate some parking in the overall design. Then you start to have more acreage to make this a little more exciting for a developer. Do you have any questions?
Say that again.
I'm going to go back to the map.
Yeah.
So
Or the vision
we,
in my head.
Pike, say Pike was a little bit wider, or not. Say if Pike was the main artery in from the service road, and if we abandon Carrick and pick up some of this land and offset the parking somehow in this development, then now we have more acreage to take to market.
Right.
Instead of, we own 5 acres, and so anyway,
Everybody's still got to deal with those power lines too.
still to do a power lines.
Yeah.
The the distribution ones can be buried, but the high power ones here, that's the tough challenge. But it can be a trail easement. I mean, there's things that can be done.
There's a hip area, Charlotte, that has worked around similar power lines. And from the street on both sides, it's minimal, and it looks pretty good. So, I mean, it can be done to where you can make it kind of blend in and not really be.
You can do some kind of art thing over here, right?
If Encore allows you to.
Yeah.
We can tie Jerry down. Twist his arm.
Good luck.
I've been trying that for years. Demo rebuild stats. So obviously we are continuing demo rebuild and neighborhood renaissance. So this fiscal year, 12 approved projects, and the 6.2 is estimated taxable value increase, but 81 approved projects to date. So we have a lot of demo rebuild customers, and all 81 have a different contract. So if you find someone and you're playing golf with them and they're telling you about demo rebuild, that may no longer be what demo rebuild is. So you always hear a lot of different, oh, I heard there's a 7-year rebate or a 15-year, and you're like, no, that was years ago. So just keep that in mind, as that's why people always say different things about the demo rebuild. Neighborhood Renaissance, 57 lots purchased to date. That's starting in 2009. So one under contract right now, 8 in inventory, 1 on MLS. But the interesting thing here is that 14.2 million added market value to the tax rolls that we've brought through this program for just the Neighborhood Renaissance alone. And that's what we can measure for homes that are finished and built. Same with demo rebuild.
Okay, so would you have the dollar amount of the before and after, what those 57 were for before and what they are? Obviously, no after.
That's how I got the increment. So the added market value to DTAD, 13.45, is the original improvement, and either the completed improvement, because it's completely finished on DCAD, or the number that they gave us as a range, so that we can have that number.
I do have a map of all the locations.
So-
I do.
Go ahead.
I have a map of demo rebuild and neighborhood renaissance, and I've overlaid them different colors. Yep. So, and you'll see a trend. So demo rebuild, a lot is around the country club, and neighborhood renaissance is not. It's more in the periphery.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. We do it in Google Earth.
So I'm looking at just the math on that. So 12 created 6, if I'm reading this right, 6.2 million. And 55 created 13 million?
55 with full value on DCAD.
Yeah. So
Oh, I'm sorry. All the other ones, we did not put in this number because we didn't have. So I subtracted those at the last. So this is the actual numbers that are finished projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that money's all.
And how many are finished?
There's the bond. It's all gone.
Almost 55.
So 55 generates 13 million?
Yes.
That's a small number.
Yes.
That's like 200,000?
Oh, okay. What that number is the difference of the new improvement and the old improvement.
Okay,
That's
it's not
added
total,
value.
not total.
The 6.2 million
It's
is,
the total
that
value.
divided by 12 is the total,
Yeah.
like a $500,000 home.
Okay.
So, Allison, for the 57 lots purchased, what fund were those purchased out of?
It started with the Dangerous Structures Fund years and years ago. And then we depleted that fund, and then we went out for a bond, and then we used bond money for that.
Okay,
Yeah. The original structure.
So it stays out of the ED fund.
I'm sorry,
So it stays out of the ED fund.
got it.
But I think we used to use a little bit from the ED fund, so.
Once we sell a property, are we putting the money back into ED, or is it just going to general fund and then?
Back into ED.
Sure. It's going back into ED.
Oh, yeah.
It will
From,
keep
we
on.
transferred it back from whence it came.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah, I think that's right, you're right.
The Carrollton, like the Carrollton property, when we sold that, originally was paid for out of the closure, landfill closure fund, and so that's settled
It goes
back.
back, doesn't it? Okay.
But generally, if
There
ED
goes your 400,000.
chimes it back in.
Don't put it anywhere else. We need it. East side. So here are 3 recent facade grants that you have seen and that you're aware of. The one on Spring Valley is really interesting because it's our largest by parcel, so it's about 14 acres. That's a very significant grant. Not a lot of money for a very large end result. And the Midway one, that's the one at Midway and Alpha that Rubicon bought the building with Benny's Bagels. So Alpha Road is really going to change in the next few years, which was really the goal and the hope of Steve May when he bought that great endorsed building. So we have one facade grant coming up. They've completed it. We're putting it on the agenda for September. That's on Alpha Road right now, Jen's place. And then there's another building they haven't submitted, so I can't say, but it's a very large building on Alpha Road, and they're going to do a massive renovation. So that's fantastic. That means Alpha has kind of bookended with updates. Bridgeview is the 5,000 Alpha that is the Aloft Hotel, and I put it there again just to keep it in mind because it is the bookend of Alpha, which has a lot of transition. And it's a good time when people come in and talk about where should I invest in Farmers Branch, investors specifically. I tell them to look at all of the Science streets in the east side because those are old industrial and you don't build industrial like that anymore. So you're going to retrofit the buildings like Cadillac did. And a couple real estate companies got rid of their office leases downtown, bought these buildings, renovated them. They have a 1-story office. So a lot of transition.
The Aloft is still on track?
As far as I know, I've never heard anything different, but
It's still included through plan review right now.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if there's any issues. But this is just some stats that I wanted to share. The office vacancy rate is low, which is a very good thing. So this comes from CoStar, and they do some forecasting and trending, but so they keep information for all the leases coming and going, and when you see spikes, that's when, like probably when JP Morgan moved out or something like that, or you had a new office online and they didn't have a tenant yet, but it was fully built. So it's good to note that as office comes online, they see that it will stabilize and continue to have low vacancy for the office sector. And then industrial and flex, I broke them out, and those are low as well, and those have been low since I started here. So this is just, we are right here right now, right under 4% of vacancy in industrial, which means we have a lot of occupied buildings in industrial, in Valwood and on the east side. And we have low flex space. Flex means it could be a showroom, it's a flexible kind of building. It doesn't have to be a hard industrial warehouse, and it's not straight office. So that's what that means. And that is right below 6%. So that's where we hope to be. It's just a sign of a healthy economy. So
Do we have any big spaces that are just vacant right now? Like,
a few floors of that International Plaza 2 for office.
that's where tenant went in?
We don't, tenant absorbed one entire building, and then there were still floors of a second building that have some space, but most of the Class A office is pretty leased up. We have some buildings on the east side, but they continually turn and re-tenant. So we don't have one large, like we did for a long time, and Basie Ruggs went into it on Diplomat Drive. We had a large vacancy for a long time, but then it got absorbed with Basie.
That empty furniture building on Midway that they're talking about turning into like a car thing, is that still moving forward, or is that?
It's coming before y'all at the next council meeting, but PNC approved it. The former Gabbert's building, it's been empty for about 10 years.
Not the 20th, you mean, the one across.
Pardon?
It's not this next Tuesday.
I don't think it's this Tuesday. It's
That's the problem.
it's one of them. I don't know which. I didn't.
What about the Source building, the
Little Way Ruggs bought that a year and a half ago, and they're in there.
so they seem like they're doing work there, but I don't know if anyone's there yet.
And I got all their, they're definitely in there. They got all their pillows and stuff in there.
I've never seen anyone with the dogs or anything like that, just,
They are definitely in there, I'll say that. Speak with them a lot. Do you have any questions on the overall?
BSN finally in the,
They bought the former Maxim building that Corvo bought, that they call it the Lone Star Building, a Class A office in the middle of the campus. They bought just that particular Lone Star building, so that's where they ended.
and they're all consolidated back again, or they still have the soft layer building on Alpha, or?
They don't have the soft layer, that was just a quick sublease, so they're fully in that building up on Beltwood Parkway. They still have the warehouses with us on the west side, on Diplomat and Benchmark. So their inventory is over there, and we have their office and headquarters.
they don't have a building on Sigma's corner,
On Sigma?
corner of Sigma and Welch.
Is that their shear division? Maybe?
Maybe that's what it is.
Remember they acquired that other company that did shear uniforms?
Varsity cheer.
Yeah.
In the warehouse. Yeah,
It's got their football logo on the wall, so.
yeah.
Big
They're,
game, right?
Big game.
oh, yeah, you're thinking of
Yeah,
Big Game
that's
Football.
big games of football.
Oh, okay.
Big Game Football bought that. That was the mint store where they did minting.
Cool.
Are we in danger of losing anybody significant that's on Verizon?
How's Monotronics?
Yep.
Monitor, thank you for asking. Brinks is doing good. Spoke to David Rett last week. They're just restructuring, but nothing to worry about. Quoted from his mouth.
What about the Wyndham?
The Wyndham did trade owners. The Wyndham Garden Hotel traded owners, and so we're looking forward to working with the new ownership.
Also,
think it'll be a
I noticed the Marriott left and it's now a
difference.
Comfort Suites or something.
You mean the Fairfield Inn?
Yeah.
Yeah, we connect with our limited stay partners, but our full-service hotels are the ones we actually do business with, because they're the ones eligible for the hotel incentive fund.
What's happening with the Elmeo site?
Elmeo.
Elmeo, and then, what is
The old
the
hotel off.
the hotel that got sprayed?
Oh, I was like, I know that name. Nothing. It's been on the market. There haven't been any offers, I think, that the owners accepted to date. We had someone come in that wanted to do a warehouse and stuff like that, but no one's been really interested in buying it that I've been aware of.
This isn't for you, but where are we at on the I-35 study?
The planning team.
Planning study, so they're out for RFQ right now, they're in the process of interviewing applicants.
So we're probably, what, a year out from getting any?
Probably so, because it's a pretty lengthy process, there's a lot of stakeholder interviews and a lot of reaching out to the community and coming back, so they'll be reporting along the way, but you're probably a year away from having a final report.
Okay. And I-35 expansion, did they seriously go back and look at the noise issues?
Did they what?
Look at noise issues.
No.
There, we asked them to take a look at redoing the noise and because of that changed environment with the west side.
For the screening wall?
No, well, just from the expansion, because when they originally did the survey, there wasn't any residential out there that it was gonna impact, and now it is. And so we kind of asked them, hey, can you take a look at this? And they basically went, no. I said, what?
Pretty
Is
much.
that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there still time on that project to see if there's any way to have the ramp that goes from 635 eastbound to 35 northbound, find a way to get an exit to Valley View?
On the express lane, you mean?
Like where it comes down further back, could you extend out under the bridge that goes up and over so that people could actually get off at Valley View and provide better access to that area so that you can access it from every, I mean, I think it still could be possible, but is there a way to look at that? Because I think that changes the entire landscape for the stationary.
Yeah. I'll ask them. I don't know if they're redoing the ramps at that interchange. I think they're just doing expansion on the
Well,
sides.
yeah, I know, but if they're gonna do something with the service roads on both sides, is there an opportunity where it comes down, you still have room?
Oh, I see.
Because when you're coming off of 35, the bridge goes up and over and the other road comes beneath it. Could you have like a lane that kind of veers right a little bit and connects in to the service road?
Well, we can ask them anything. I'll ask them.
I mean, because forever, you have to go to Valwood or you have to go to Josie and make a U-turn and
If
do
you're
all.
westbound, you mean?
So you're going
Or
east.
eastbound?
If you're going east on 635, you take the
Right.
flyover. And instead of getting on 35, if there's a way.
It goes
where
under the
that-
Valley View.
Right.
Yeah, it goes under Valley View, so
Yeah.
it's at grade already. Is there any way to just get a lane that kind of merges over that now allows people access to Valley View in that area?
We'll ask.
Okay.
I can ask. I happen to be speaking to them right now. They actually have been a wonderful partner by helping one of our largest businesses, Essilor. They were going to put their service road through one of their important buildings, which had a lab in there and had to replace 350 people. After looking at their design, they redesigned it, and they are no longer going through the Essilor building.
Okay.
That's a win.
It's a huge win. Essilor is very thankful to them and to the city for asking for help. So that was really disruptive to Essilor, and they were really concerned about that. So we are grateful to TxDOT for doing that, because that is not an everyday thing that you get them to redesign something.
Any movement or change on the TxDOT land on 635?
They're going out for a new appraisal,
There's a year.
and they took it from the person in TxDOT that had been handling it, and they're giving it to someone else.
Well, that could be a win.
So
Within
we
TxDOT.
have first right again?
Yes, it could be. We still do have first right.
Okay.
We do. And so, yes. And once I hear that they get that appraisal finished, I'll request it, and then I'll put it, I'll let you know. I'll share it with you. So that's all I know for now. It still is a tough piece of land with a gas easement,
Yeah.
and they won't allow parking on the easement, so the developable acreage is very linear, and the PD only allows pretty much retail SUP for a hotel. And the heights are tiered, but they're tiered to where the taller heights are toward the service road, but that's where the easement is. So it's a really tough piece of land, so you need to be creative with it. And we don't allow multifamily on there, and, so. I think good things will happen with it. If they get realistic with their number, then they could actually attract developers and development. But yeah, I think it's a good thing that there's been some transition internally, because asking twice the price of the appraisal just didn't work.
Any more questions, comments, discussion? All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, actually, just kidding. How much of the ad is in the budget for the demo and build?
Huh?
That's the 400,000. Yeah.
There's more.
That allows us to do what, 13, 12, 13?
Usually it's bronze.
If you were at 30,000.
Yeah.
Allison, while you're here,
Yes.
quick comment
Yeah.
about Farmers Branch Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, you want me to
Yeah.
come in?
Yeah, I'd like your input on, not to put you on the spot, we had a process, we took it from 80 to 60 to 40 last year.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
And,
I do recall.
and we're gonna be, at some point in time, I think, considering, do
Yeah.
we leave them at 40?
Right.
Are we getting, by contrast,
Mhm. Oh.
Metrocrest Chamber
Metrocrest.
versus Farmers Branch Chamber, who generates the best activity for the city?
I
Uh,
believe we give the Metrocrest Chamber about 7,500 in that neighborhood.
They're asking for 10 this year.
Or 10. And so I think the return on investment on the 10 we give to Metrocrest is higher. Because
as high.
40 is a lot. I think the reason that we gave them that 80 years ago is because they were going to close down. And so we thought that would help them stay open. And then but I don't think that was meant to happen into perpetuity. I think we wanted them to be a self-sustaining business. I just don't think they've gotten there yet. I think that was about 5 or 6 years ago, so.
So, if you had an extra 20 in your budget versus,
Oh, in my budget?
versus
Absolutely.
the 20 in their budget?
Well, I don't want to
No, I'm-
steal from
yeah.
charities or whatever, but
No, I'm putting you on the spot. I apologize for that.
that's okay. I would just hope that any chamber that we gave money to was helping grow our businesses and assisting the businesses. The Farmers Branch Chamber has a plethora of businesses. It seems to be more small and medium size when you see the entire membership. The Metrocrest Chamber has a really good blend and a very large base of membership renewals coming in and events that I'm proud to take a business to.
Yeah.
And so I know you have a lot of decisions with the chamber. John used to run the chamber, so really you should put John on the spot. Because if you want to know more about the chamber, you're in the right room.
was a train.
So my understanding is that they put out, they did interviews for an executive director, and they're actually put out an offer to somebody. So,
Terry, can you speak to that? I guess, are you up to date on with it?
So, I go to a lot of their meetings. I've been very involved in trying to help them. It's no secret that we had the wrong person heading up the chamber for quite a period of time, to the detriment of its success. And so with the dismissal of Nanette, they've been sort of in a little state of flux, if you will, because there's been nobody there to help run it, guide it, go knock on doors, go meet with businesses. That has, I will commend Alex Call from Five Star Ford for really taking the baton and doing what he can to keep our chamber alive. Despite that, we've had some new members. They are looking to hire a new, they call president. I don't like that title. I've asked them to change it because I don't think that's representative. You know, the chamber needs a salesperson, which is basically a glorified door knocker that can go out and not sit in the office, but go out and knock on doors every day and get in front of business owners and tell the story of the chamber and why they should, why you should join. I would like to see us fund it at the current level for one more year. I think that they're very close to hiring somebody. They may have made the offer last week, I don't know.
They did.
Okay. And if that person takes a job, I think that she will be, I think she could be very good. But, you know, time will tell. I've been wrong before. So,
Everybody.
but I'm an advocate for us having our own chamber. I personally don't feel like we get the service out of Metrocrest that we deserve because they have bigger fish that they're serving. And Carroll, they're always going to serve Carrollton in a bigger way. I say this having been a salesperson all my life, in that I'm greedy. I want all the business for myself. So I want my chamber to serve me. I don't want to share with other people. I'm interested in building business for Farmers Branch, not for the MetroCrest area. I want Farmers Branch businesses to thrive, and with a lot of new development that we have coming in the city, I think it's really important that we try and do everything we can to maintain our own chamber. And hopefully, with some of the things that I've suggested to them in terms of reporting, that will get better and make council, this council, the next council feel better about participating with them.
So if you're a new business moving into Farmers Branch, and both chambers approach you, which, and you're only budget of one, I know we divide, many, or at least several of the people in Farmers Branch are also in MetroCrest, right? So,
Yeah.
you're getting, so the question is who are you gonna go with? Are you gonna go with a larger, more productive, or are you gonna go with the smaller,
So I would say that there's people that in Farmers, we have businesses in Dallas
yeah,
that are members of the Farmers Branch
Yeah.
Chamber.
yeah.
And I don't think it's unusual for a company to be a member of multiple chambers. I don't know, we're not that expensive, and I don't know what the MetroCrest rates are to join their chamber. But whatever it is to join our chamber, whatever it is, there has to be a value, a true value associated with with a company spending that money. And that's what I preach to them. You have to have things of value, otherwise they're just handing over money, and nobody wants to just do that. So that's why we really need to focus on developing things that will serve our business. The chamber needs to focus on things that will serve their customer, their business, whether it's through programming or any of the events they do, things of that nature.
And how can they help the city? What is their role in moving Farmers Branch ahead? And how,
So,
I mean, we put in the last 4 years, we put 160, 220, $260,000 in the last 4 years, since I've been on council, into that process. How have they moved the city forward in a way that, in any more significant way than the MetroCrest Chamber of Commerce has moved it forward?
Well, what I do is I give companies the information of, hey, we have MetroCrest Chamber, we have Farmers Branch Chamber. They usually go to one event of each, and they make their mind up then. And that's how it is. They have marketing dollars, is what it is for them, right? And so they don't have marketing dollars for every single association, but each chamber is in competition of every other networking group anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the hardest part for the Farmers Branch Chamber, is that might not be their strength.
Terry, if you, real quick, I'm in support of what Terry's saying. I would like to see them keep the level at the same amount we did last year. They've done really good work this last year trying to reimagine their programming and what they're doing. They've come up with some new ideas. The individual that they're planning on hiring is a younger lady, kind of like Erin. So is that someone with a little bit more energy, new ideas, and kind of wants to make a name for herself, give her she'll have the drive to go out and win more businesses to kind of save this chamber, because basically it's on her. I mean, it's been communicated that if this doesn't work out, they're probably going to either need to shut down or merge with the MetroCrest Chamber. Now, I will say that there are strengths to both chambers. Farmers Branch Chamber definitely serves smaller to mid-sized businesses. There's a small community there. They love it. They've had, recent uptick in some membership, so you're starting to see more people come in, but, you know, what they need to do is probably get on the same page as MetroCrest, because the programming, in my opinion, is night and day. I mean, you have much larger, bigger programs addressing bigger issues over at MetroCrest, but you also have a bigger base to draw from that allows you to have those events, to whereas the Farmers Branch Chamber needs to reimagine some of the things that they're doing and how they're going to provide value to these businesses, because in the past, I personally hadn't seen it. Just going in there like, how do these same 5 networking events help these businesses grow, get information to become stronger and better networked? But, you know, I think there's strength to both of them. And on MetroCrest, I will say over the last few years, they've done a tremendous job doing events in Farmers Branch, highlighting Farmers Branch. And I know Aaron is wanting to start a target advisory group, which would be a small group of Farmers Branch businesses whose focus is to spend more time in Farmers Branch. And I've actually asked her to do what she does in Addison and Carrollton, which is office in Farmers Branch in some way, shape, or form, you know, a few days a month, you know, like she does in some of the other cities. So she's spending time in our community a little bit more. And so, you know, there's opportunities for both chambers. I think we actually funded MetroCrest at $10,000 last year. I think it was 10. Because I know she asked for more money than it was previously, and I think we granted that, but, you know. Huh?
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Sherelle, do you remember what it was?
7,500.
It was 7,500.
Now, Jay.
I will say this, Robert, you know, I thought long and hard about this, and I had conversations with Ron and Alex and a couple of other folks, and I thought, okay, if this just isn't working, is there a way that we move our chamber activities or incorporate some of that into our economic development department? I have not had this discussion with you, and so you're probably hearing this and going, oh, what am I gonna do?
Hey, I'll take money.
But it's.
Deliver service.
Yeah, well, I'll find some, I'll find it anyway.
We had 2 people here that were responsible or are responsible for bringing business to the city. And part of their job is to retain business. That's John, and right here. And, you know, Allison does a great job of trying to get businesses here. And who better to help keep them? Maybe it's somebody within your department. Maybe it's Amy or somebody who then takes on the role of
Recruitment.
well, the programming role, and maybe our chamber is sort of our city, or part of our local government doing this as a value add. I don't know. It was an idea that we had discussed because we just didn't want to lose it in total.
Which I just feel, you know, in the event that it doesn't work out, you know, let's say worst case scenario, it doesn't work out. I hope that it does. I hope that they thrive and this new leader, you know, takes it, hits the ground running and changes the course of the chamber, you know, brings it back to its old glory. But, you know, there is benefit to the synergies that are there as well with the chamber that is already have programming that a lot of people know about, a lot of people attend. It's a well-oiled machine and it's run very efficiently. I mean, they have 3 people over there, similar to the Farmers Branch Chamber. I mean, in terms of size and power. And so you just got to look at why recreate the wheel again and try so hard to do something to where if we could get our chamber, you know, the people that are in there that are dedicated and focused on Farmers Branch to be that target advisory group, they could still do the same things and advocate for our city and our businesses and work hand in hand with Amy and Allison and John on the recruitment and some of these other things, because there are a lot of opportunities at MetroCrest for leadership development and small networking events and some of these other things that I think the Farmers Branch Chamber needs to focus on and find their own events that are of similar importance and value. And I think that's some of the tasks that needs to be handed to them as they move forward. I mean, it's just, you know, they kind of got to step up their game a little bit this next year.
Yeah.
So 3 years ago, we had this conversation about what is the role of the chamber and what's the role of the city in supporting chambers. And, you know, from my memory, what was discussed is originally, cities really don't give the chamber a lot of financial support. They give them internal personnel support and encouragement, which certainly we do as well. And you know, we put together a strategy of going from 80 to 60 to 40 to 20 and to work them down to eventually 10 and kind of wean them off. And so, you know, I'm not standing here saying, I'm, you know, I would tell you verbally, I think that plan was a good plan, and I think it's still good, but if the consensus is we're gonna do it, my question is, you know, what is our strategy going forward? Is it 40 to, you know, we're gonna 40 on out? Are we, for those that wanna stay there, or should we continue that process to wean them off, give them new director, give them a year to get their feet under them and to research and move to 20 next year and, you know.
I'm in favor of continuing that plan. I was just looking since they've, you know, finally got a new director, you know, one more year at this level because it's an expectation that's set that I think allows them the opportunity to, knowing going forward, hey, we're going to continue this plan because we want you to be more self-sufficient. I think is just something you have to communicate to them so that they can plan for it and they know what they're up against in the next year and 2 years to come, you know, in order to stay open and keep hopefully keep going.
Because that potentially, you know, if we were to move from the 20, that gives us, you know, Crystal's plan of creating a fund for smaller local, you know, communities that would that potentially raise us some money that we could, you know, transition into that, you know, put that money there and perhaps move more quickly on it. But, you know, so I'm okay with another year. I just think that, you know, our long-term strategy that we talked about before was good, and maybe haven't heard from.
Well, yeah, I was gonna chime in here because I guess I said I was unnaturally harsh with them last year. And it led to some changes in the organization. I don't say that's the proximate cause, but it was already underway. And kind of reluctantly went with the 40,000 because we were promised they're gonna do a consultant and they're gonna hire the president. And that took a lot longer than I had expected. So I was kind of with Mike that, you know, we had a plan. So yesterday we kind of got beat up for, you set a plan with the police department to do it a certain way 4 years ago, and we shouldn't change that in midstream. But, and so we kind of had a plan to knock them down to 20. And I understand, you know, I guess the only thing I really want to know is, it took a year to do the consultant and get the president. Was that really through no fault of their own, or was it through lack of ambition or lack of rolling up their sleeves to get it done? Because if it was the latter, then I'm pretty much support Mike and let's drop them to 20 and move on.
And I think they had gone through that process and then they found somebody, but then the other person had already taken the other job, so they had to start all over.
They did, so there was a two-step process.
Yeah, so it was a two-step process. And I actually met with them last week. In my job, I'm the liaison between the hospital and about 9 different chambers. And every chamber is different, but you're right in that the chamber has to prove that there is something that the business can kind of take advantage of that's actually going to help their business grow. Mm-hmm. And some of these things are unique, and some of them, I even told them, you know, doing a civics for business where they look at the trends of demographics and how it's affecting their workforce. If there's a lot of construction companies, really getting to know who is in their city so they can cater to that. So if they have like a lot of construction, they can look at the trends and see how that's changing. Those types of things are mechanisms that other chambers are using. I think we have a very unique opportunity because we aren't as large as, you know, some of the regional chambers, in that we do have that networking aspect. So I think the chamber's in a really good job, but not their signature events that a lot of the other chambers have, and the accessibility to some of the big players in the community that I don't think the chamber knows that we have. We have a lot of really amazing people that live here that are, you know, entrepreneurs and whatnot that are retired, and so maybe putting that those individuals in front of them to just be thought leaders and talk about, you know, strategies and how they got to where they are. And so I talked to them about all those different things, and I think they're very susceptible to that, and they're very excited about the opportunity with this new person. So I would agree with Rob that, you know, let's see how they do this next year, see what changes are being implemented, see what new partnerships they're building. But I do agree that 40,000 is a lot of money. And I know that, from my experience professionally, cities do give a certain amount of funding. Some of that's to kind of assist with some of that economic development, but it's, compared to the city, the budget, it's not that much. It's similar to what we do for like MetroCrest. It's, you know, 7,500, 10,000. Of course, there are cities that have their chamber be their economic development arm, like Irving and Richardson. We don't have that, which is, it has its pros and cons, but I like the city having their own economic development team, so that'd be really tough. Like what Terry said, kind of having you all focus on programming, because that's not really the point of our economic development team. But I'm really confident that I think with some guidance that the Farmers Branch Chamber can really, you know, get more partnerships, especially with maybe just having a new leader. And that we can see what next year, see what happens, have them come back up whenever they're up for, you know, that request again, have them prove to us the changes and the new implementations, how that's economically affected our city, and go from there. So that's just my thoughts.
I think Kim's done a good job with what she was handed, who's the interim smart lady. But it's a hard ship to turn around. It's a hard thing. John, do you remember how much the city received from, the chamber received from the city when you were running it?
Yeah, it was, I think we got $60,000, but it wasn't like, here's $60,000. It was a contract, and it was, you get this much to perform this, and you do this, and then you get the, you know, then you get the money. It had to be 100% spent. None of it was for, or very little of it was for staff salaries. It was for actually performing functions. We did the business retention, the city didn't have a business retention program, and we essentially were the business retention arm of the city. And that was a big effort, but it came with, this is how many companies we met with, this was how many employees they represented, this is what the tax value was, here's the notes from that. We would have follow-up meetings for larger companies. We'd bring council members that were, or the economic development office or whatever, but it wasn't, here's $60,000 to run your business. It was a lot different then. And I've spent 15 years of my career as a chamber executive, and I thought, you know, I went from here to Midland, which was a much, much, much larger organization, and we didn't get a penny from the city. And I was really surprised by that. And they said, no city gives a chamber money. I'm like, well, we got money in Farmers Branch, and that's kind of how that was done there, but that's not how that was done there. Now, we were the Economic Development Corporation, so we got the sales tax for that, and we were the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we ran the convention center, we managed sports stadium. I mean, there was a lot that we did, but we didn't get money from the city. It was for specific functions. When I was in Frisco, we didn't get a penny from the city. And we had a contract with the Economic Development Corporation for business retention.
No.
But it was, again, it was for a specific program, and
Yeah.
so,
And people have
I
asked
think-
me, if it closes, how would it hurt our businesses?
Yeah.
Like if it actually shut today, what would happen? Would there be just, you know, pandemonium? Would there be just a crisis? I can't say that
yeah, I
our
met with
businesses
their, you
would
know,
be in a
before I met
crisis.
with their board and said, if you closed today and didn't open tomorrow and never opened again, what would the business community start in your absence? And that's really where you need to be. And from a membership perspective, you either got to make a chamber member money or save them money, and that's it. If it doesn't do one of those two things, you don't do those. And I think chambers have a huge value to a community and to a city. I don't know that we've realized that here recently, and there's an opportunity with a change for that to happen, but it needs to be something that we absolutely say, that's a no-brainer. And I don't know that we're there yet, but I think there's an opportunity.
Like even last year, we forego the evening of excellence, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so that they could fund the consultant and do what they needed to do.
I mean, to me, something like that is critically important. We go to events where our companies are being recognized and winning awards, and we weren't doing that in our own community. I'm like, well, what about our large business of the year? What about the small business of the year, the entrepreneur of the year? Let's do those. Let's celebrate those kinds of things, because I think that's something that we all would get behind and celebrate. We want to have our businesses being recognized for excellence, and if that's what you look to cut, it's like, that's kind of at the heart of what you do.
We did ask them to do retention a few
Yeah.
years ago. They asked me to chair the retention committee.
Yeah.
So I was spending a lot of time hurting people. We didn't have a lot of fruit from that. There weren't a lot of visits, and there was very little reporting, which is what I was after, information. So,
I'll say this in closing, and I think the onus is on them. I don't want to spend $40,000 to keep something in business that's not gonna do anything for us. We can use that money on some other worthwhile project. I will be the first one to say that. They have their board, and if you look who's on the board, you get David Prince from Eagle, David was Council Frisco, EDC Frisco, Alex from Five Star Forge, Jerry Halliburton. So they got Laura Braun and what's her name?
David Brett with Monotronics.
Yes, and so they got some good people trying to
New.
help guide them, and we just haven't had the right people running. We have not. And
For a long time.
it's hard to say bad things about Kim McCutcheon.
Right.
She's not a chamber president. She
I think
is
she
a,
did a great job.
Well-
For what she was handed, I think she did a great job.
and I would argue that, but they recognize that, I think the board certainly recognizes that, and they're trying to maybe right that ship, and I'm hopeful that the young lady they're gonna bring in will be the one to make a difference.
What's the 40,000 targeted on salary? Is it salary for the first year or what?
It used to be a contract for services, and it may still be, Ben manages. Don't you, Ben? You manage that
Yeah.
contract?
For the next year, I haven't written it yet, but yes.
But you did last year, year before, it was certain,
They had to do some deliverables as far as turning,
Yeah.
are they gonna appoint a new leader?
Even
Those
your
components
estimates.
as well,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
And provide reports to us, because under previous leadership, you all are furnished with a copy of the one that was highlighted and handwritten on, and it was not what we expected for a business that we were getting $60,000 a year to, as far as performance
terrible.
on. Yeah.
No.
And so that was to make sure you understood what we were getting for that contract versus the data we really thrive on in our organization to make evaluations about the level of performance we're getting. And so this past year, they have been furnishing those reports. They've definitely been to a higher level. Hopefully, they'll get even better as they continue to improve.
Well, they've got to get better, because I thought what they supplied, what I've asked for in terms of membership growth, numbers and whatnot, has been crap that they've supplied me. And I'm their biggest advocate, okay? And I don't like
That doesn't bode well, Terry.
Well, I sound like I'm talking out of both sides
I
of my
know,
mouth.
yeah.
But I asked them to give me certain information to help justify them spending money, and what I got was like nothing. And then the presentation that was made when Kim came before council was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. But yet I'm fighting a battle to I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help you, not you, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to help them. And so we can show information that justifies to the council, and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Well,
But
having Terry
I can't
involved,
expect everybody to do things the way I would.
right.
yeah, having Terry involved to me gives me a much better feeling. Because it takes an advocate, it takes a person that's kind of, can be that front person. And that gives me a much better feel. Because, I mean, if you ask, like, hey, if we had $40,000, would we make a bigger impact in the community than the chamber? I would say today, yeah. But the chamber, like the Firehouse Theater, the investment you make in the Firehouse Theater is phenomenal. It's exponential.
Yeah.
And the chamber has that ability. Having an advocate from council with the chamber that's in the business community, I have a lot of optimism about that. And I, for whatever it's worth, I think it's worth, let's give it a year
4 more years.
and let's see where we are. I think they need to understand next year, it goes up to 20. You know, it was supposed to be this year. And you certainly have the ability to wow us and make us, I mean, I remember before that the council would advocate on behalf of the chamber for more money. We would come in there and they said, oh my gosh, they're doing all these things we've got to do. I mean, that's where you want to get, where you have raving fans that are saying, how can we do more with you? And how good would you feel about that? If a year from now, say, man, how can we put more into that organization because we're getting so much out of it?
Yeah, I wish it was better. I don't get
We all wish it
a
was.
great amount of feedback from businesses that they are so excited that they joined in events, honestly. So some of them join and then they drop about a year later, so that's the
Well-
reality.
I'm good with that strategy. I know I'm the one that brought it up.
But it's
Of giving them another year.
It's a
But I
balance.
think that, we've been waiting for them to, we've given them the same challenge 4 years in a row.
For longer.
Well, I can only speak for the last 4.
You're right, I mean, we were there together.
Yeah, and, so,
Yeah.
Bronson?
My spot's not changed on this. I feel like last year I was giving them 60. We set up a deal for them to go, 80, I thought 40,
Yeah, we're cutting
and then we
it.
changed it
Yeah.
to be 80, 60, 40, and now we're going 80, 60, 40, 40. It's one of those things I hate seeing us give taxpayer money to fund, the operations of a group that have been, I'm gonna say incapable, well, the people they had were incapable of managing the business. But, that's, I get asked every once in a while, why don't we join? It's because I don't see a value in, I don't see a value in our company being a part of it. It's not just jump on to be a part of it and to fund them. But at the same time, if I felt like there was a true value in it, we would definitely be part of it. So that's where I have a hard time. Last year I wasn't in favor of us, changing the rules again. And, again this year, I feel like that what we do for one, we should do for the other. And I feel like we way underpay MetroCrest, and I feel like we way overpay Farmers Branch. And I would, I think that once the dust settles, if they are in it, it will stay alive. That being in that $15,000 to $20,000 range for each is about all I'm good for. And if that's as long as they're continuing to hold up their side of the, of the bargain and provide a value. So.
Well, I'm on record saying, for me, it's 40 this year, it's 20 or 0 next year.
Or 0, yeah. I'll go there, okay. We talked long enough. I'll be there too, but I'm voting for it, or saying I support it, because I don't want the political repercussions of canceling it out. And so I'm willing to be wowed. But I wasn't last year,
Right.
and haven't been this year, but, I'll admit, I'm not as involved in the chamber as you two are. So if you guys are both telling me this is a good investment, so I'm with you.
I would say this in closing, that one of the directives that I gave the new person is, I said, you need to reach out to your council members and you need to get them involved, because they can be as big of advocates. They are advocates for the city already, and they're interested in talking to businesses where they should be. And businesses want to have access to their elected representatives. So use that to your advantage to help create some type of programming that's going to be to your benefit. So if you get a call, hopefully you'll be able to respond and say, okay, yes, I can give an hour.
Yeah, no, I have when Alex calls me, or,
Right. I'm not afraid of the political repercussions. I'm
not afraid of it, I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
We just don't need that.
I want to make sure that we're doing what's best. I know that the business is 77% of our, tax rate and whatnot, but I want to make sure we're still doing what's right for those residents too. And, I think we've been kind of wasting some money.
We've cut it in half over the last 2 years, so.
Yeah, but when we first talked about this, our
I know.
first budget,
I know.
we were,
Situations change, opportunities change, and, I hear where you're at, so we all know.
Which means we can do the
yeah.
high-low for the police.
Yeah.
And we do have a retention person at the city, Amy Mueller, and she is doing a great job. She does at least 20 visits a month. qualified visits with reporting, we talk about it, so, and not all visit to company A is a one visit, because lo and behold, they're gonna have questions or problems or whatever, or who will fix this pothole, so it turns into multiple, sometimes a project. But she's doing a great job, so that need is being met. We have 4,000 businesses, so there's no way we're gonna ever get to every business every year, you know, but we do our very best with that contractor.
I'm gonna, if I could, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Yeah.
So with Amy, making at least 20 business calls a month, to me,
Business, not calls, sit down.
sit-down
Meetings.
visits.
I mean,
yeah.
she's been in the Blacks and Brick Company, because they're on the list, so I made her go.
So-
And he's like, why are you here?
Well, okay,
Because that's your job.
to me, just based on my background, that sounds really low. Because I know when I'm out selling advertising, when I was at the radio station, I'd see 4 or 5 people a day. And they
Oh,
might be hour visits each, but, and then going back and getting proposals together and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of back-end work, but my job was to get in front of it. I can't sell anything if I'm not sitting in front of you.
Right. And her job is so different because, of course, she's not selling anything. And I want her to meet with the executive leaders. So getting with them takes a long time. They're not just easily available and ready to meet with the city. They don't know why they need to meet, we're good, we don't want, so it takes a long time to just get that meeting. So she does more calls than she ever does visits. But to get the meeting, we're waiting for the right person. We don't want to just go in and meet with the person at the front, drop off a packet and leave.
And most businesses aren't on a month-to-month lease, you know, tenants here for 10 years. So, I mean, if you get to
Yeah.
them once a year, it's
We're
probably
willing to
good to pop in and see them, and you gotta spread it around with 4,000 businesses, so, you know, I get it. But, you know, I think we've handled this one, and let's move on. Shane is, you know, probably trying to get home to get to
I know what
bed.
you're saying. I know what you're saying for saying.
After that long flight.
I'd push her more if I
I'm
could.
sorry for
We can
jumping
talk
down
about
this
it.
rabbit hole.
No, you're
No,
good.
that was a
It's
right-
good conversation.
It was a good wrap.
One less conversation we have to have in the next few weeks. So,
Do y'all need anything else from me?
no, we're good, thank you.
Otherwise, we would have gone there. It was free.
So I guess everybody check out at 10:30 checkout time?
No.
Close to that?
Check out.
10, okay. Very good.
What do we gotta do, check out?
We took all our stuff.
Out of your hair.
I think they know.
Yeah, my stuff's out. My stuff's out. I'm good.
You've already checked out.
Not checked out.
Do we have to physically check out, or we just have to be out?
No, you just have to be out.
I've got all my stuff in my car already, so I'm out of the house.
Yeah.
And you leave the key in the room.
Keith, what's the definition?
It's like Vegas, just leave. Shane, whenever you're ready, man, fire away.
My understanding, I had some questions about trails, so I figured before I jump into these two, I'd take any questions you may have on trails or anything else that came up that was related to sustainability or public health.
That'd be Mark's presentation from yesterday. If y'all have any questions.
These people have some questions on Camelot as well.
I'm sorry, say again.
I said, I think one person had questions about Camelot.
Where,
Thought someone had a question about Camelot. Because they were asking Mark, and Mark said he couldn't answer.
So I had noted something briefly about landfill, and when Mark gave the presentation, and so one of the things I had met with Shane about was trying to be more sustainable at the landfill, and we own the landfill, it's ours, but yet we have a company that we've hired for the life of the landfill to manage it. And while I think that the revenue splits are not where I would like to see them to be, I realize I'm getting into some space that maybe I shouldn't, but what I would like to see is a a way for us to divert material from those other customers that Republic is letting dump at the landfill. Currently, we are the only ones that are trying to divert brush from the landfill. And while that's important, there are other cities that actually have on-site mulching operations at the landfill. And so I went and met with Living Earth, Shane, and I would like for us to explore the possibility of putting in a mulching operation at Camelot, paid for by either Republic and or Living Earth. Shouldn't cost us a dime to do it. But I really think that Republic should be the one to pay for this in order to try to keep more green material, or, excuse me, more brush out of the landfill. And if that can be done on site, great. And it's just one of those things I think will help to further extend the life of our landfill. So that's what we've started some discussions on, and so I just wanted people to be aware of what I was doing, so it didn't catch anybody off guard. And hopefully, if anybody wants to go, sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll go down to Arlington to see their operation. So.
Yeah, City of Arlington does have one similar arrangement where the city owns a landfill, Republic operates it for them. Living Earth is actually the contractor on site for mulching and composting. In our permit, we did it through the landfill expansion. We included in our permit application a site that we called out, which we couldn't have to take out of the floodplain. And there we labeled it for accessory uses, one of them being composting or mulching. So one of the things, looking longer term, we're going through the process. I asked our attorney at the time, so we're trying to do both at the same time. We highly recommend that don't do that. Get the landfill expansion first. You can tackle that later. So there was some forethought put into that, but yes, I think just we'll have to make sure purchasing wise, in terms of writing an RFP or something of that nature, we're following our rules and regulations. But I met with Living Earth in the past too, great company. We chose Solo Building Systems just because for what we're doing, it was easier for our staff to take stuff to Solo Building Systems just because everyone, the size thing I was concerned about in terms of the pricing is just one price for whatever we took across to their site. So it just made it a little easier for my guys. But Living Earth is a very good company also. They do a great job. Yes, sir.
First of all, I fully support that, but the reason we did separation of the bulk and the brush was so that we had clean brush to drop off. How do you overcome that problem if we do a thing at the landfill?
It's always a concern. Most places, like we take a dirty load of brush out to the Solo Building Systems and their guy sees it. We got to figure out to pick that thing back up, so we're really careful about what we take out there. We don't get some pile that had someone stuck some bulk debris in the middle of it. So as we pick it up, we're always looking to see what's in there when we're diverting and make sure that is not going to be a contaminated load.
Yeah, but I think where Terry's going, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that we get Louisville or Carrollton or whoever else, Dallas, coming there and diverting their trucks. And we can actually charge them like a lower rate to divert the truck rather than put it in the landfill.
That's one of the issues we have is we have a staff that picks it up, so we can mandate with our staff. They're going to have to deal with waste, waste management, more Republic or CWD or possibly Progressive. They don't merge at some point in time in the future.
But we don't have a mechanism to require that.
We don't. No, we wouldn't want to encourage it. We would incentivize it.
And you'd think that cities would self-select, that if it's cheaper to go that route, that they would. But, we know just by what's happened in our city that it's, going through that process of essentially mandating that residents separate, there's political repercussions to that as well.
Right. Yeah.
And so that some cities are willing to tackle it, and some not.
Pella's tackled a little bit, not to the length we have, but they do have some brush. We do separate that. There's a typically something to grab by hand. Because one of the things a lot of cities don't offer, or Republic does have them, are the metal boom trucks, just because it's so expensive to operate. CWD doesn't have any in the fleet. They've asked us what do we use and things of that nature. I think they're getting pressured by some cities to offer that. A lot of the garbage companies just don't operate those just due to the cost tied to those. You just say we're not going to pick it up unless we can pick it up by hand. That's why it's really hard to compare garbage from one city to another, because the service levels are so different based upon these challenges of what you want to do in terms of diversion and collection.
And if you're only picking up bulk once a month, it's hard to say, we want you to just separate it out.
Some cities do most frequent than
You
that,
gotta
once a
run 2
quarter or
different
something like that.
That one day.
The only,
Yeah, I think it's, I support the idea.
we want to just try to get to, I think, that point, and there's, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, I don't know. But we at least need to explore it.
Agree completely.
Mhm.
John?
Thank you.
Anything else landfill related?
Good idea.
Okay.
Maybe it's raise our price on everything, but if the city does,
Yeah,
if
once,
the city will do that, then we can give them a discount.
Republic's done a really good job of holding the line on pricing. Waste Management quite often drop theirs, and that's what,
Yeah.
everybody that got the, so when we got the Waste Management contract, we hired them, they got a lot of contracts all at once, and it's because they really dropped their price. Everybody that was in the sales part of that was gone within probably 6 months to a year after we signed our contract. CWD seeing some of that now with their contracts, they're winning a lot of them, and they realize what they're leaving on the table, so their prices are creeping up to get closer and closer to what Republic's charging. Republic's done a very good job in terms of the company holding their line. Here's what we're gonna charge. We're not gonna go lower than this. Landfill's been the same way. So there's a chance they probably have more volume over the time, but they've got a really good, their price has been focused on the price. And you're gonna see a lot of benefit for that once they get there to close in about 18 months, because they've really tried to hold the line, and their intent is to increase that price once they know we're pretty much the only game in town for that part of the metroplex. So,
Yeah, is there an ability to limit where you say, we can only handle so many trucks a day or whatever, and calculate what the DFW is, so you can say, raise our price now and join up with this, because if you don't join up with us today, you're gonna end up driving 26 miles and leverage those top people today to, to go ahead and make the transition today.
so Republic handles all the pricing. Charles can get a little more experience. My understanding back time when we handled the pricing and operate the landfill, 1 year we make a lot of money. The next year we couldn't be as nimble and change the contract price. People would walk away. Next thing I know, the budget's well below what they expected. So Republic, we had a much more. So they had the ability to make those changes without going back to council every time we want to make a pricing change. So that's part of the incentive for contracting that out. How they handle their pricing like that, I fully expect they will consistently raise the price. But also municipalities, they do still have options. Folks can still go to the city of Dallas landfill because it's cheaper. It's just, it's location becomes a solid waste just because how much it takes to get a truck down there. The fuel cost, the thing goes 2 miles a gallon, so.
Let's jump into some of the sustainability stuff. That's what I came here for.
It's not sustainability, we're talking about diversion.
I'm talking about moving to solar.
Okay, so hired Shore Power to do the solar feasibility assessment. We reached out to them to see where they were in terms of the Mansky Library and other ones. So basically they're covering, they want to do the interconnect study. So they're gathering information from us in terms of electrical usage, trying to figure out when's the peak usage time at a city facility, which is what they need to know for Encore. We're also trying to understand what are the project constraints. So for the city facilities, there really shouldn't be any project constraints in terms of regulatory other than our own personal review process. But from the landfill one, you have the potential of TCQ getting involved and what are the potential constraints there. So it all is going to depend upon, make sure you keep the site graded at a certain level so stormwater still runs off. If you're going to put conduit through the ground, well, the liquid in there, which I wouldn't do for this, but just understanding what's the issues there. If they're concerned about sparks, they make you enclose it or encase it, which just increases some of the costs. But really it's going to be TCQ in terms of the landfill one out there in the west side of town. Physical constraints we've already covered, or any easement issues or setback limits we have self-imposed in city code. So we had a call with Adam and also the guy with Seal Capital, Dan. We had Kevin Menchow in the room with us also to hear what his thoughts were in terms of the Mansky Library and the roof replacement. So I could hear what Adam's and Dan's concerns were in terms of solar panels being up there. And what's our replacement schedule, how we're going to replace that. So Kevin has been well informed of what they would recommend. And it wasn't anything different than what Kevin planned to do anyway. So I understand we use white roofs now. Due to the recent tariff issuance, my understanding, according to Adam, the only panels that are not influenced by tariffs are the double-sided ones. For some reason, those have gotten by a tariff, so it makes them a little cheaper. So once you have a white roof, you can kind of get some more solar energy bouncing back and pick up a little bit more sunlight that way. So those are things we discussed in our call. Certainly when we get to the point where we replace it, we'll reach out to Adam and make sure we've done everything we need to if this looks like something we want to do going forward. So like Kevin understands if there's any special requirements for the roof itself, other than hopefully a white membrane roof essentially. So we'll make sure everyone's involved with this. But right now they're still trying to gather all the information we need to do the assessment. And that's where this one stands at the moment. But he's kind of working on all of them at the same time, not just one here, one there. It's getting all the information from the city for all electrical uses at all of the city facilities. So it's not a big update on this one, but this is where we are and what we're looking at. But all staff is involved. Yes, sir.
So I'm just asking some general questions. When we get a little further down the road, when you invest in solar panels, and you might be the one to answer this, I'll just use this as very simple math. You buy a solar panel, put on your house. If it's supposed to generate 100 watts of electricity, does it generate 100 watts of electricity forever, or does the panel over time begin to degrade to the point where it maybe 90, maybe 80, maybe 70?
They assume a 0.005 degradation over every year.
Yeah, it's built into the
It's built into
efficiency
the
rating of the panel when you buy it. So if my panels were 210 watts each, my system is 9.445 kilowatts, big system. And it, built into the model they model it to 20 years, is they build in that, it's built into it. And so the only way that you lose is when the panels get dirty. That's it. So whenever I get a little alarm that, 10%, when my threshold is 10%, when 10% changes, I either have a tree or I got dirty panels. So a tree that's doing something different that it hasn't been doing. And so typically over one season, you won't see a tree. I have a really, really tall, I can't even think of the name of it, that grows on the side of the house, and it'll shade. It's picked up some of the morning, sun. And I didn't want to cut the tree back, so I changed the model for a certain time period, not to be looking for the 10%. But it's built in, so when they rate a panel, it's rated based on the degradation over the life of the panel. And the life of the panel is 20 years. So
In 20 years doesn't go to zero.
It doesn't go to zero. It still operates. It still operates at, I think, well above 75 or 80%.
And you have a battery?
I don't have a battery.
So battery storage is something else that would need to be considered, and it's getting more feasible, but battery storage is still kind of in the early phases of what you can do, and it's always something you could add later. But I will say that the hope here is when we go through facility upgrades and we look at the improvements that need to be made in each facility, hopefully, going from T5 lighting to LED lighting, tightening up, the walls and, where we have leaks and where energy is escaping, how can we tighten it up to where it becomes a more efficient building, that the degradation from the panel outweighs is not as much as the savings we would get from making a more efficient building. So over time, hopefully it stays flat, even changes to our good, but you still got to look at the costs and where it's coming. And at the library, there's no trees around that roof that would give you any shade. And some of the other buildings we've looked at, there's certain areas where they've identified this is the best place to put this.
So, and again, I don't know a whole lot about this, so I'm just asking questions, but, with the big storms that we had, knock down the trees and whatnot, if those panels, they're not going to be sitting on the roof, they're going to be mounted up. Have there been instances where they've gotten ripped out of a roof by huge winds? I mean, is that something that...
It's always a concern, make sure the roof can handle that additional wind load. The bigger concern is baseball size hail. I think no matter what you got out there, it's going to be destroyed. So you got to have insurance to have them replaced.
Okay.
I'd be more concerned about large hail events. I think those become more common just with some of the changes in weather we're seeing now, more intense storms.
My system this year will be 10 years old. It's survived hundreds of golf balls. hundreds of golf
Oh, I
balls.
didn't think about that, yeah.
Kids with baseballs, and any hailstorm we've had since September of 2009. So, you know, if you think about it, they, like I said, the wind uplift is the thing that they engineer into the equation. So they had to come in and reinforce inside the house, inside the roof, in the attic to make sure that they could, but it, you know, the roof underneath there is like in perfect condition. And the roof where the panels aren't is a different condition. And it's a class 4 wind and hail resistant roof, but still it's a different condition. So it's a protective measure to the roof just by happenstance that it covers the roof. But, you know, from an impact, golf balls all the time. And kids hitting baseballs, you know, kids hitting all kinds of things. And like I said, the biggest problem is keeping them clean. You know, when we have, you know, dusty times or, you know, season changes when the winds come and pick up and we have the storms, you know, that gets them dirty. And, you know, typically a pawl will stick to them. And I just got up there with I don't even get up there anymore. I've got a long pole, just dip it in soapy water and scrub them off and then hose them off.
Yeah, and in a lot of these models, you'll see provisions for insurance. So if something were to happen, it's insured. But then also overhead maintenance, which is the cleaning and just maintaining the system. And sometimes a panel might go out and you just got to go, you know, reconnect it or figure out what happened there. But, you know, that's all built into the overall kind of plan. And I mean, it'd be different depending on what path we go. Is this an owned system or is this a third-party contract? And you know, you just look at what's going to be best. But
yeah, so insurance is built into my contract with Solar City, which is now Tesla for the time. They pay for it the entire time. But it's a solar, or it's a solid state electronic. So it either works when it's made or it does not work at all. It doesn't have a moving component. It doesn't have something to fail over time. It's a solid state component. So it works when it's built and initially tested, or it doesn't work at all. Now you talk about impacts and whatnot. Yeah, that, you know, that would be the only thing that would change the solid state, you know, depending on where an impact. But I would think as many times as my panels have been hit, it's pretty good.
And you know, there's always the thought that when we had that big storm and the library had to close, could it have been on the next day because we didn't need Encore there.
So, do we get, do we actually have a individual electric bill for the library?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can look and see what that cost of electricity has been over time.
Yes.
And how much we spent just for that building.
We've
Yeah, they've been provided.
to Mr. Shore's team. They have it for every facility we have.
Okay.
And trying to be a little more detailed, so we certainly have the gross numbers, like per meter per month. Ideally, he's trying to figure out during the day, what does that usage look like too? And that's what we're trying to get is that detailed level of information for you. So Charles said we have years worth of data per facility.
Right, and back whenever
That's huge.
Yes.
when I did mine, we didn't have smart meters yet. So now the smart meters are so smart. I have a really big system. They were over-engineered back in the day. They didn't have some of the things. Now, my house would probably get a 3 or 4 kilowatt system because they can look at the demand as every 15 minutes with that smart meter throughout the day and when it's going. And they can look back seasonal for a long time. So, you know, being able to see that. But I also have a second meter. I have a second meter that meters what I put back to the grid. And so that's always spinning. Always spinning.
And they have new meters now that you can plug on top of the existing meter that connects all the systems and makes it even more efficient. It does all three of them.
Right, so I have a second meter, and the second meter was one of those things that you had to have a smart meter back then to get a system. And the smart meter actually does the net solution, but I wanted to see what the system produced. You know, you can always see what the system produces by looking. It's the old school, just the spinner. And it's a meter that all the power goes into before it goes back into the, it's just kind of a, you know, a check sum to make sure that it's all, you know, and it shows you how much more accurate the smart meters are than the spinning. And smart meter shows I've made more than what the spinning meter shows. Small, but over 10 years it showed up.
And how long did it take you to make it pay for itself?
So my original ROI was 49 months. And my system paid itself off at about 27 months. So they give you a schematic, you know, like they do, just over time, and they base it on pretty conservative average, and I completely blew past all of that. And I live in credit until July, and I'll have a very, very small bill for July and August, maybe September, and then I go back into credit until next year. And I didn't realize.
How is the power, whatever you're using in the house, know that it's getting the power from your solar versus what's coming in from?
It doesn't. So what happens is the electricity travels the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
So the system is designed to take in power and push it right back out to the grid. And since it's least resistance, it's going to go to the houses that are immediately next to it. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But they're able to track what I add back to the grid. So there's only 3, I think, they're called DRGs. It's a distributor renewable generator that you have to use them to buy your power from in order for them to record your power back to the grid. I think it's Reliable, Green Mountain, TXU, and maybe 1 or 2 others. And so in the beginning, it was just TXU, and they only bought it back at like 7.5 cents. But I was buying power like at 10.5 cents. Now I use Green Mountain, who buys it at 11.5, and I'm buying power for 9.5 from them. So it's morphed over time. It really has. But I had a good friend of mine who I went to his house in Prosper, and he had a ground array. This is in 2007. And his ground array, it followed the sun. And his expenditure was, a long time ago, I think he was in it for $250. And he was a fully SLA, had, LED batteries and everything. He was off the grid. And that kind of got me thinking about it. And so I contacted the people that, kind of gave me some insight from him. And they said, just wait, it's coming to Texas. It's coming to Texas. Don't do anything with it now. There's going to be some really good incentives. So the incentives were fantastic back then. I'm not sure how the incentives commercially are right now. But, my system was about $86,000. And $51,000 came from a grant from the federal government. And $24,000 came from a grant from Texas. And I paid the other $6,500 out of pocket.
And part of the impetus of, looking at this right now, this early.
These grants go away.
Because using a third-party group, they might be able to obtain the 30% tax credits available through the government. But starting next year, that drops to 24. Then it drops down, and it drops down until it gets to 10%. I think by 2022, 2024. And so you get what you can now, because that reduces the price of the system, for us in this time period.
And I would bet that the technology on the panels themselves, in terms of what they collect, is a lot greater today than it was 10 years
So
ago.
when I first got it, they were changing, they were improving about every 6 months. The technology was improving the panels and the inverters and whatnot. It was a real quick turnover. Now I see inverter technology changing about every 12 to 18 months. So from a panel efficiency, they're really efficient, a lot more efficient than they were when I got them. And it's, if I was to swap all my panels out, my system would go to like a 13 or 14 kilowatt system. I'd never see a bill. I'd never see a bill. I'd generate so much power. But there's a diminishing, I'm like, the system's done well. I don't want to mess with anything. Yeah. But, it's one of those things that I wasn't sure what to expect back then. I just knew that I was like, hey, this just seems like the way to do it, to go solar. And, I kind of bought a hybrid car at the same time. I was kind of, doing the whole thing, but it really was, I had to look at an efficiency standpoint that putting the solar on the roof was only just a small component of it. I mean, changing from, the light bulbs to LEDs, and I'm on my actual 3rd generation of LEDs in the house. Using smart technology where it knows when I'm home, so everything is either on or off. And using stuff like that. So it's really making sure that, your efficiency for windows, insulation, and roofing is there. Obviously, we're getting ready to do a new roof, so it's going to be obviously the most efficient possible. So I look at it as I wouldn't consider it by itself because the cost is not there. But when you have to consider everything that you have to do, some of the upgrades that need to go to the library anyway, it makes 110% sense. And the ability to I wouldn't call it be off the grid, but replace its own power is a big deal. I really think. And you think about how much we pay every year collectively for all the buildings, and they all have basically flat top roofs on them. I mean, that's just, please put something up here. It's what they say. And they sit below the parapet, so you don't see them. It's not like on my house where I have my neighbors complaining that, you messed up the neighborhood. You put solar panels on your house. You'll see them.
The only ones you'd be able to see if we did it would be the ones on City Hall, but you'd have to be behind the building.
But the thing is City Hall's roof, you would not put anything on the front. I think
No,
you have
no,
all that.
they have to face south to southwest
Yeah.
is the optimal angle. And, you know, one thing that I think we need to look at is you look at how many people are moving to Texas, how fast people are moving to Texas, and you already look at the strains on ERCOT and their energy demands and how much they need to build in order to get this. So where are rates gonna go? I mean, they could always.
I think the
But-
buyback rate's gonna get bigger, and I think there's gonna be another round of incentives that come out. I don't know, probably be after the 20 election, but I believe there will be more incentives to come back out. Because when I did it, I was the first one in North Texas. And now I see houses in Farmers Branch. I see other houses that have it, and I always, ask, who'd you use or how to work, and it's a really, I like to keep my house pretty cold. I like to hang meat in there. So my electricity bills were crazy. And now my electricity bills are, I think July was, $36. In July and maybe 2007 may have been $700. So it's and the process has morphed and changed. But I got to tell you, it's because we're having to look at roofing and whatnot. There's no reason why we shouldn't even take advantage of it.
How many square feet of solar panel do you have?
Give me a few minutes, I can find out.
No, I mean, it's not, doesn't cover your whole, I haven't
It's the
seen it.
front, it's the front of his roof.
Complete front of my roof and the west side of my roof as well.
Okay.
I mean, it's 42 panels. I mean, there were people in the neighborhood that were like, what are you doing? Now it's a moot point.
And I was like, the thing that initially scared me about this was, the initial cost estimates or ballpark estimates we heard, and I'm like, okay, how are we gonna pay for that, why not? And so I was like, this is not something I wanna even get into, but now looking to build a new house, I find myself wanting to know more about this, still a little bit away, but I will have the perfect opportunity because I'll have a big roof and a lot of surface area facing south and southwest. And so, whatever I can do to, just on an individual basis, to just lower what I'm paying every month would be to my advantage. And so I'm interested to see how it would impact the city and if the cost benefit is really there.
This is the last comment I'm going to make on it, so we can go to the next one. But I mean, this was pitched as if this doesn't save us money, there's no reason to do it. And it's coming. The way we would pay for this would be coming from dollars that we're already allocating year by year basis. So it's not a raise that needs to be done. It's a mechanism of figuring out, okay, we can use the money we already have to either pay for the system or reallocate those dollars towards a PPA or some other agreement that is consistent. We can say for the next 15 years, we know what our power looks like. And, it's something you can budget for and account for. And while it changes, I mean, it's up to the group that signs up to make sure that we get what we need. But, that's the way it was couched. And I think that's the way all of us are looking at this. Like, if it comes back and it doesn't make financial sense, moving on.
Yeah. I mean, the house I'm building right now is going to be a net zero house.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm putting 2 Tesla walls in it, and you can shut the meter off and I'll still be on. So that's the whole intention of, and I wouldn't have done that if I didn't have the experience that I have now. I know exactly what's required. I know how it all works, and so it makes sense for me because we tend to be a high consumption house. And I think I want to, obviously lower our footprint, and that's the direction.
Thanks, Shane. Next, I think it's the water.
Water conservation.
Oh, sure, I got you.
In terms of water conservation, basic things, water, of course, is a finite resource. We got so much to go around. And of course, you have a 30-year contract with Dallas Water Utilities. 2017-18, they delivered 142 billion gallons of treated water to Dallas and 23 wholesale treated water customers. Then what I do is I looked at what's our benefit here? Why are we looking at this? Well, we're also required to look at what do we use in terms of, with the water conservation plan. And so that's covered in 30, chapter 228 of the Texas Administrative Code. So Dallas has to have one, and hence those of us that buy water from them have to have one also. And so we have to reduce the unnecessary consumption of water, reduce the loss of water from the city water system, the city's customers, and of course improve efficiency. So in our water conservation plan, plans in general, here's your goals. In our plan, to be more specific, what we're looking at is reduce the city's total per capita water consumption by 1% in 5 years and up to 2% in 10 years. So not a real stretch of a goal, but that's what's in our plan. And then the per residential one, 1% in 5 years, 2% in 10 years again. Reduce the unaccounted water for the water production of customers in the system up to 3% in 5 years and up to 5% in 10 years. So where do we get our water? Most of you already know this, Dallas Water Utilities. Our daily contract volume is 17 million gallons per day. So we have 2 delivery points, get 10 in one place and 7 at the other. So that's now what we can handle, that's what our delivery point is. So with Belmarsh, it's 10, Wicker is 7. Those can handle more, but that's what we get delivered. Currently we have about 18,200 total meters in the city and 209 miles of pipe ranging from 4 inch to 24 inch. And all this is administered or handled by Public Works. So here's been our consumption, just kind of looking at it over time. So we are reducing the amount of water we consume as a city as a whole.
So that's the slide you all saw. It's just a copy of the same information from the budget presentation from day one. That since we're talking water, we also laid that information in there. Thought it might be relevant to the conversation.
So this is good, but also it creates some challenges for Public Works too, because within your water, you have chlorine in there. Chlorine is there as a public health impact or aspect. If chlorine residual gets too low, the water becomes unsafe. You're not treating the bacteria. The biggest concern is bacteria is going to build up, so they're going to drink the water and get sick. So as the chlorine residual drops lower and lower, at some point in time it gets too low, you actually have to flush the water to get the such an old water out of the system and get the newer water with the higher chlorine residual in there.
Shane, can someone explain that, why that very last data point?
I can.
Yeah.
I'll help. This is something that we talked about in our in our earlier conversation. Remember that the last line of data is up through May.
Right.
So every particular point is going to drop off because all the other points before it are comparing full years. So just mentally go, there's, we want to provide up to the as tight as possible of data, but that's why that's showing that the graph is trailing off.
Which the two biggest one overall, the trend is a downward trend. So, yeah, so it's definitely a significant one because it's not a full year at the very end.
Will that, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, will that change with the onboarding of more multifamily?
Still, my next couple
West side.
slides, yes.
Sorry, jumping ahead.
Yes, you are.
Other unmetered, what is that?
That's
The flushing, things of that nature. If a water line breaks, we don't have a meter when the water line breaks. We have to estimate how much water was lost at a water line break.
Fires.
So,
fires.
fires,
factor in
those kind
there.
of things. Any place where water is used and there's no meter attached to that usage. So the fire truck didn't have a meter showing how much water we used to fight a fire.
But does Dallas know, like if we have a fire, and I know they use, they have a formula, they calculate how many minutes they had water on. But if we just didn't report that, are they gonna know that that water is missing? There's no meter on the main fire lines coming into the city.
So there's a meter coming, yes, to the main lines, the Belmarsh and the Wicker, they have a meter.
Oh,
showing
at the big,
yes.
at the big, okay.
And so at the end, we know how much is concerned by our residents, so we got this difference, this delta of what we charge for versus what we paid for.
Okay.
And so there is a difference out there. They would know, and to them, they sold us the water. So for us, we want to make sure whatever we're buying, hopefully we're making money back off of it. That's right.
I can't remember, is the next slide, talk about the flushing and why it's increased so much for water use.
I'll make sure y'all know this slide, we'll tell you this kind of intently. Y'all good with this slide?
So is there, maybe he asked it, I didn't hear it, is there an average of that delta between what Dallas billed us for and what we build in lost water? Is that a
Well,
standard calculatable number? I mean, is
There's
it?
not, and it's gonna be heavily weather dependent. So right now, you're starting to see a lot of water line breaks, because you're going through, not a drought, but we've quit getting rain now. You've had a lot of rain this year. Now the water's gone away, you have very clayey soils here, so what's happening to the soil? Essentially it's shrinking, it moves, and you have metal pipes, plastic pipes over time, that movement doesn't seem like much to you and I. That's where you get your water line breaks. Also get a bunch of rain again after a couple months, guess what? Now the soil goes the other way, it swells, the pipes move again, you start seeing water line breaks. This is across the entire region. Right now, a lot of cities are dealing with water line breaks just because of older pipes and the movement of the soil. Let me go on to the next part. That's why is there an average one, Bronson? No, there's not, because it's all dependent upon how your weather kind of goes each year. That'll really dictate your unmetered water loss there. So here's our usage just from the last, I just pulled out what we used over the past year. And the numerical numbers, you saw kind of the graph, but here's the actual numerical listing. So of course your main usage is summer months watering, that makes complete sense, what it should be. Water purchase, 2.86 billion gallons. Water loss due to line breaks, meter discrepancy, leakages. We estimated at about 456 million gallons. So again, we flush a lot of it, especially right now at the west end. So on the west side right now, this time of year, just because you basically have an underground reservoir of water on the west side. All those pipes are just sitting there, it's holding water as much as your water towers are. So until you get that redevelopment occurring on the west side, get more homes there and more businesses, that water doesn't move fast enough. So we gotta flush the water to keep it safe. Otherwise, we risk public health issue. Boil water notice. Nobody wants that.
Regarding the flushing.
Yes, sir.
Carrollton just launched a pilot program. They're looking at doing it at homes along the end of like the water line where you typically see the flushing, and encouraging them to, when they need to flush and test the water, to sprinkle their yard so that it's not just being wasted down the street, and they can actually use it to water their grass. And is that a program we could kind of monitor to see how that,
Yeah, what you're also
that
trying to
looks
do.
like, how effective it is
Gotcha.
to maybe implement?
That's a great idea. Instead of just flushing it down, if you can find some other way to use it. And that's always your concern as a city. We can go use it too, but you're telling folks, hey, conserve, and all of a sudden our parks are lush as could be, we're using water everywhere. It's a tough one for a
Well,
city.
if you tell them why you're doing it, it's
Right.
like, hey, we're using this because it's better to use it rather than just run it down the street
Exactly.
into the sewer and send it off.
Yeah, I think the education component is really important.
Yeah.
As long as you campaign it,
Yeah.
as positive, that's a great idea.
People will still forget them, so
I know, but do their due diligence,
come on.
stay positive.
I'm
Maybe we should build a city on car wash over there
Yeah, along the west side,
to
yeah.
keep it all running.
Just give us a pull on the west side and we'll be fine. Just kidding.
So we're into, can
Keeps it sprinkled.
Keep the water moving.
can we improve this water loss? Yes, you're doing that right now by the redevelopment you have going on. The apartment usage, and the homes are going in, they'll take care of some of this water loss just due to flushing. May not take care of all of it. We'll get to that math here in a minute, so you can certainly challenge what I have out there. I'm trying to be pretty conservative. The large part of the flushing is on the west side, where it's just, like I said, it's underground pipes, and there's just not enough movement out there. But the other point I want to get to, and Mark's more the expert on this, but I did take an engineering class, water design. You want to try and create loops for your water system too, and not have a lot of dead-end mains, because those are the ones you really have to flush, because there's no way to move that water other than the end of the pipe. So if you get loops going everywhere, it keeps that water moving a little bit better. So Mark's looking at that too, at the west side development. We need to create some more essentially loops out there to help keep the water moving also. So really trying to understand, as these homes come online, what we can do to make sure we don't have the same issue moving forward. Yes, sir. You have a-
No,
Keep going.
you just touched on it.
Okay. So here is my, trying to get to, can we make up that difference? So I tried to find a study out there where someone calculated how much is used by an apartment unit and also how much is used by an average home. Well, actually I used our city one, so I tried to find one online, it wasn't very good. So I did try to find some, this one actually I found a study for, this one was from our data. So try to figure out an average usage and then multiply that times the number of units that are either in construction right now or we know they're on the books for proposed in the future. Trying to figure out, all right, what's that usage gonna look like? The same way with the homes. And try to see, all right, what does that number come up to and does that equate to our water loss we're currently seeing just due to flushing? here's what the estimated usage would be. If you remember, our flushing loss is about 400,000, a little over that, if I go back. 455. So this is very conservative. There's no commercial business built into this, no industrial, so no restaurants, any of those things that are possibly proposed. Anything that has outdoor water feature or pools, all those are gonna create more vector of loss and hence more water usage. So this is only looking at potential apartments and homes on the west side. And that pretty much makes up for a large majority of what you're seeing in terms of flushing right now, just due to public health issue, a potential one. So again, here's my assumptions, which to me is the most important thing. We're talking about mathematical model calculations, so you can at least see what I assumed when I came up with that number. So the other thing too is if those apartments aren't fully leased out, the number's a little high. I estimate the assumption all the apartments that are going to be proposed are going to be leased. Criticize that one all you want, but that's what you notice how I came up with that number. I did pick apartments in our city that were newly constructed to get a sense of, I don't want to use an old one. The newer ones are going to use less water because they're more efficient. The new code they're being built by. So there's no point comparing it to like Cook's Creek or something like that. We're probably using a lot of water just due to the nature of the construction. Also for our homes, I also used the most recently built homes to try and do the same thing. And also those are smaller lots also, which is typical of what you're going to see on the west side. There's no point comparing it to one in Brook Hollow or Spur Trail, just due to the size of their yards. So it's a very conservative number I came up with in my opinion. I think it's probably going to be more than that just due to the potential development. But there is some way to try and get to this of not having to buy more water in the future, hopefully, and finding what development goes on the west side and across the city as some of those changes. Your warehouses don't use a lot of water. If something else comes in besides the warehouse and redevelops and uses more water, there's also some additional usage there. So I do think there's a pretty good room in there where we can hopefully try and stay long-term or where we're at instead of having to buy more water from the city of Dallas. And that's what I was trying to get to with water conservation with this. We're more looking at it from financial impact longer term. And can we handle that and stay where we are currently? So I think the plumbing code's handling a lot of the efficiency. There's other things we can do as a city, but the plumbing code certainly helps. Things have to be more and more efficient as you put in new construction.
Was that apartment calculation and home building just the west side?
Yes.
So it doesn't include the east side apartments?
Nope, because I don't know what those numbers are going to be. I just used the ones that we knew are on the books right now being constructed and the ones we've got site plans for. Yeah, I didn't look into anything.
Because we're building apartments.
Right.
So would this, I mean, be in line with kind of the challenge I've issued
Mhm.
of trying to say, hey, let's stay at 2.86. And once we're fully built out, if we're still at 2.86, and you're still buying the same amount of water, I mean, just quick math, you're still buying the same amount of water, but you have more people to spread it out over. Does it become cheaper for everyone, assuming no inflation?
The other unknown here is Corvo. A while back, they basically shuttered their plant.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge loss in terms of water revenue. Now it looks like the plant's gonna come back online. They still may face the same thing with TMAH, which was their reason for shuttering their plant. But it looks like they need this, so my guess is other parts of the country are cracking down on this too. We've seen the similar problems TRA has. They haven't fully ramped up yet. They have submitted a permit to TRA to come back online in terms of discharge. So if they can come back online, that kind of handles some of the east side stuff we're seeing in terms of water usage. But that was a huge hit for the while to the budget, I assume, because they pretty much, they locked the doors and walked away from their plant there on the east side.
So, but we're gonna have more development on the east side with multifamily and some office development. Are we ever gonna need another water tower?
That's one I have to ask Mark. I'm not sure what how the system looks. I've never heard him complain about the east side. It's basically been the west side, but in terms of the pressure, it depends how many high rises you have would be the other thing too. If you have a bunch of them, you gotta shoot the water up 20 stories. Maybe you do just get the pressure high enough for firefighting capability. And so basically still have a pressure issue, not so much a volume issue. That's a good question to ask Mark. I get the limits of my knowledge of engineering.
I know that the east side and the central part of the city, they've historically been, when we look at future projections, they've been good. The water tower on the west side, admittedly, we probably put it in there a little bit too early, but trying to decide exactly, the timing of when to have the water tower, exactly when, development starts the next year. You can never, it's the same thing with the fire station number 3. That probably went in a couple years too early too. but the timing is almost impossible to make. So at some point, that west side, we're not gonna have to flush it anymore, which we won't be wasting that water like we're doing now, which is helpful. But, in the capital improvement program, it's a 7-year program, and Mark is projected out, at least for that 7 years, that there's not a need for another water tower anywhere in the city. And I've never heard him talk about, quite frankly, multifamily doesn't use that much water. The worst kind of water usage you can have is, quite frankly, the residential category, because they peak. You don't want the peaks. The peaks are really hard to control through your distribution system, and so because you have residents irrigate during the summer, their usage it almost doubles, if not triple, during the summer, and it goes back down. And so that's what you have to manage around that. You have to manage in having a capacity to deliver water at everybody's peak. And so, I'm not worried about the apartments coming in on the east side. That's not going to be an issue.
They have a lot of very high-story buildings really make a difference over there.
Correct. And the single-family lots on the west side, it's a large house footprint and a fairly small yard. And we don't have, Dallas Semiconductor / Maxim is not a player, and that was our largest customer. They're gone. And that was on the east side. So I think we're in good shape in terms of capacity and ability to handle the water delivery in the city. And definitely, with the sewer interceptor tunnel from the west side, the east side to the west side, we have a huge capacity in terms of being able to transport wastewater from the east side of the city to TRA. So from a utility perspective, we're good, and we're in great shape.
You just brought up something about, a couple years back, we added a meter on some segments that weren't metered, that Addison floated us. Is there any, what did that add? Was that a significant portion? Did they reroute around us, or what did they do?
It wasn't significant. It was more than what we were estimating and they were paying us for, but it's not significant. What they're gonna have to do, right now they have, the best scenario is for them to, and they have in their plans over the next 2 years, to actually reroute their sewer lines to go into their own inlet into the TRA system. Right now, they're still going through Farmers Branch, but at the junction box or our city limits, they actually have installed a meter. We required them to install that meter so we can measure and know exactly what they're doing.
But it wasn't metered. We were guessing for a long time, right?
Yeah, we were guessing.
And so now it's metered, and it was more than we were expecting, so.
Yeah, it was. But again, in the whole scheme of things, it wasn't significant, but now it's accurate.
No, it's just wastewater, right?
Yeah, correct, it's wastewater.
Plan to cover that.
Gas.
Why?
Tankless.
Okay.
Because there's too much usage.
We'll use too much electricity.
No, too much usage. Like,
yeah.
they too much water.
Any more
Too many users.
Any more questions or comments for Shane? Charles has some discussion points he wants to go over. So, yeah, go on, sir. As far as I know.
All right, just kind of wanted to, I know Councilman Rapano, you need to leave at 12:30. Lunch is at 12. We have this place till like 3. So those are kind of the dynamics of where we're going. I wanted to kind of have some wrap up of what the conversation's been so far, and also give y'all time to talk about just anything in general we've not talked about the budget. But just there's some wrap up items that are fairly large that I want to make sure we have the right direction on. In terms of the property tax rate, even though the maximum set rate was 61 cents, my sense in this discussion is at this point in time that we're looking at maintaining the property tax rate at the current level. Is that an accurate assumption? Because we really haven't had a discussion about, if we did 61 cents, what could we use the additional funding for? Again, my sense was there wasn't a forward motion on that.
Yeah.
We have to let people- It's
Yeah,
back.
we know where Bronson is.
Yeah, because I know Bronson's not there.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a little bit the other way. I came here thinking that we would be able to find some money that we could cut loose to put towards the creek. And short of that, you know, I think that if we can't tighten our belts in other places and generate revenue for the, you know, to move more quickly, because I think we need to solve this first $6 million problem. You know, so that when we come back and we have an opportunity and we hire a consultant that comes and says, okay, if you buy this 10-acre spot or 20-acre spot, you know, whatever, we come with a plan, that's gonna take a lot of money. You know, we're gonna need the stormwater runoff to finance that.
Yeah, you know, maybe I should go through all of my wrap-up comments because some of those address that.
Yeah.
So let me just go through my list and a couple little thoughts about the big my sense of the big wrap-up items, okay? Property tax rate, we need to have that discussion. Then in terms of stormwater, and in here, and I will throw a couple things out. First, I want to let you know that breaking news, unfortunately, of this morning is that we've been notified we're not going to get the grant for Cooks Creek. So it's on us. So given that, what I would recommend is we consider a $3 million general fund balance transfer to the stormwater utility efforts, which would include the $1 million that we have already kind of given as a loan, that would just be forgiven. So it would be a total of $3 million and not have to have any kind of payback. Because to go one way and then go without, we will just do $3 million in total, including the $1 million that council's previously authorized at the last meeting. I know there's still interest in having a bag/bank stabilization program that I think we can do within the confines of the existing budget. But that would, remember what we talked about before, is the projects, the REACH projects along Farmers Branch Creek, all the bank stabilization within that, the banks would, or all the improvements within that, the banks would be stabilized as part of that REACH concept. So really we're talking about the onesies and twosies that are not within a REACH, how to help them if they want to have some kind of help on a bank stabilization program, and that's where we talked about having, you know, a 50-50 participation. You know, that's something we do intend to come forward with quickly and think we can do within the confines of the existing budget of the Stormwater Utility Fund. Definitely got from council to go with a Freeze and Nichols detention pond location study as soon as possible, and then come back and present a land acquisition and financing strategy associated with that. I do want to, is food for thought. I'm going to tell you a story from our past, and that past was the east side had an issue. The issue was that the wastewater lines were not big enough to handle the wastewater from development on the east side. And so what we did as a city is we said, you know, we're at capacity. We can no longer allow any more development on the east side. So what we'll do is, you know, we will, for a period of time, not issue any more building permits. And property owners, if you want to improve your property, you can, but you're going to have to sign a petition allowing for a public improvement district where we can issue debt and use that debt and the assessments associated with that to pay for improvements to the wastewater system. As an incentive to sign that petition, we said, okay, for a 10-year period, 100% of any improvement you make will be abated from taxes. That particular, that's what we did. And that particular endeavor spurred most of the buildings along the toll road. A lot of the newer buildings, especially like the International Plaza, and there were at least 4 or 5 different buildings that came. So it spurred a lot of development along the tollway. So just think about that again, that's an overcapacity of the wastewater system. Well, aren't we kind of overcapacity on our stormwater system? It's a similar concept. So just keep that in mind, that you could use that as a kind of a carrot and stick. In terms of, we still need to have a discussion about Bella Road and whether or not to move forward. On the stormwater utility fund, do we want to maintain that recommended rate of 15%? Do we want to go higher, or do we want to wait until we have a land acquisition strategy and use that as part of the financing strategy to possibly issue debt on the stormwater side and up the rate to pay for the debt? In terms of parks, my sense was there was a desire to increase the park equipment replacement renovation funding from $50,000. I'm going to throw out, if we can come up to $350,000 annually, maybe look at the aquatics revenues as a way of increasing that. And the police department, the benchmark information that we followed up on that, if you throw out the high, Plano, the low, Fort Worth, guess what? It's the same. So that kind of answers that, unless we just completely kick out the highs. The high-low strategy that I mentioned yesterday would not change what you saw.
Did you run it, like if you eliminated all cities, 200,000 or more?
No, we could.
Because I think that would put us more in the realm.
Yeah, but those cities are not going to be paying what we pay. Not to stay competitive, they're going to pay what they can afford. And I think we've been paying to stay competitive to keep us having the best. So I get the philosophical idea, but I don't think it's going to make us any different.
There's only 6 cities that pay more than we pay. And 5 of the 6 are large cities, and people, the other 12 cities or 13 cities on that list, or actually 16 cities, right, on that list? There are 23 total, so less 6 is 17, and us, that eliminate that, so there's 16 other cities. Are all paying less than we pay, and they're able to staff theirs. Probably have the same problems we have, but, our current strategy, like we say, we're gonna have to change. And we can change now, or we can keep it the same now, but we need to come up with a strategy. So maybe it's a later discussion, but.
All right. But that's kind of the end of, I was just trying to capture the big things that are still on the table, and that's the end of what I had out there.
So I had identified $493,000, that was related to the new fire station that we're spending on landscaping. And, and again, beautification, for delaying that a year or two, for grass to generate, if we needed additional funding, I was gonna.
That 493 would be offset by the sale of the old site.
Yeah, when we met with Addison, UDR is trying to do a new development there where the office building is, kind of as Spring Valley approaches Vitruvian. And we were like, would you be interested in buying this property to make the development much bigger than what it was going to be? And something that could be an asset to them. And they seemed, both Addison and UDR seemed open to the potential idea.
Even though it'd be in Farmers Branch?
Yeah, yeah.
But that is the money that we were using
Yeah.
to potentially pay for that.
Yeah, to where we could not only not have to spend this money, sell it, and receive some money as well.
Like you're paying, we would
Like
get more.
UDR buys it for 500,000, so you save 500 and they buy it for 500.
So you have $1 million to play
You have
with.
$1 million.
No, we're selling the property.
Oh, you're selling.
And getting
Yeah.
the cash. And
Oh,
we're
so you're
going to-
already selling it.
And we're
Yeah.
going to pay for it.
I thought they were saying there was landscaping
No,
costs
it's
for
revenue.
$493,000, huh?
revenue from the building was
Was gonna
was paying for the landscape.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Oh, so it's already like a,
Right, we've already.
Gotcha.
it's already a,
It's
Yeah.
a
I
wash.
wasn't here,
Wash.
I wasn't here for that.
If we left it all grass, what's the downside? Is there any regulatory something that's driving us to do some kind of landscape work?
I think there was an expectation, I think in community meetings, that there would be some type of a park. But it used to be Holiday Park, we were taking the park away.
We're not taking a,
It
it's
wasn't-
only using
Grass.
about 20% of that
I know.
area called Holiday Park.
But I think that was the thought, that that would be put back. Or
No, well,
something.
it will be, this is beyond what it is now. I mean, there's like
Yeah.
a trail that's gonna go around it, it's gonna be kind of an amped up park.
Yeah,
Because right now it is just grass, and we're not taking away the grass.
right.
So Mike's point is we can postpone that or whatever,
Yeah.
do it over time.
I just wonder if we need to put a park there, given Vitruvian has a fantastic park there for all the people that are right there.
And if you want to walk, Brookhaven's right across the street.
Right.
Has a great trail. I'll throw that.
So that's
This is my
out there.
fourth, I'll say this, I think I may have said it individually, this is my fourth time to come to a retreat, and we've had numbers, and I'm starting to feel like the citizens of Farmers Branch, we've come, and ultimately, we've really not ever cut or changed or moved any funding from one place to another. You know, we're, and maybe it's because the staff does a perfect job and it's the right thing, but I feel like, you know, we're, sometimes maybe I feel like I'm too much of a rubber stamp. And, you know, and that's why I ask questions, and, you know, I don't want to, you know, and I talked with this about John, you know, organizations, you know, have an inherent way of continuing to do things the way what they've always done it, and that's ultimately the demise of great organizations.
Well,
You know, because
these budgets, though, are not put together in a vacuum, and they're year-round discussions from council, and we're hoping that what you asked for and prioritized is in that budget.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to come here and say, hey, we talked about all these things, where are they? We're hoping the things that you've talked about, we can point to and say, they are in here.
And I'm not looking to make a change just to make a change.
Yeah.
Right, you know, and
but if we need, we're saying if we need to, there
Yeah, we
may be
should.
some wiggle room with the 400,000 to, yeah.
yeah, there's
Okay.
money there somewhere.
I just wanted to bring up a few points of clarification just to make sure. So the barn funding, we're not including that at all. We're gonna continue to look at options for individuals to give us a bid that's more amenable to what we think it should be, right?
Correct.
The
Or
rec
somebody to
center,
die and give us a whole bunch of money.
I'm sorry?
Or somebody to die and leave us a whole bunch of money to build the barn in their honor.
Yep.
We can
An
do that.
estate, yep, that'd be amazing. The rec center, so we're going to, we've decided, you know, of course, we can still discuss it, but the renovations to the recreation center, we have,
$400,000 at least for one more,
I'm sorry?
the 400,000 at least for another year, and look at maybe getting grant match.
Yes, to kind of do the changes and look at different options to maybe use one of the gyms to kind of see what we can reconfigure. Okay, got it. And then you mentioned the playground, so finding the 300,000 to kind of add funding to increase the playground budget for the next few years. And then the other ones are ones I mentioned. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. So basically, but we have about 4 million, right? To kind of an additional funding that we could allocate.
No, that was one of her first slides of, it was going for, you know, the additional personnel, it was going for $400,000 for the rec center funding.
Okay.
The $742,000 for the library funding. I mean, there was
Okay.
that was one of
Oh,
her first
okay.
slides.
So that wasn't additional. That was the allocation. We found the 4. We were putting, okay.
Yeah.
Well, did we reach the resolution on the parking lot? That was part of the 700 and some odd thousand. Did we reach resolution on that? I didn't think.
I don't think we did, because right now we're
I think we agreed with the air conditioner and the roof, right?
I think we somewhat agreed on the resurfacing for now, and then looking at the
Did we?
new
Okay.
RFQ
Okay.
to give us
I probably agree
options.
on the parking lot
Yeah, I thought
because
so too.
It's because of safety, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
okay.
I
remember
think,
that now.
yeah, but I think with the with the RFQ for the library, they were gonna look at, as part of it, the reconfiguration of where the parking lot could go, right?
Yes. They will address it holistically.
Yeah, that's what I think so too. Okay.
Charles, I have a question, because I do remember reading in the newspaper a while back, City of Dallas, they're boring like an 8-foot wide stormwater tunnel that's gonna go from the tollway all the way around the city somewhere to White Rock Creek or Lake or wherever it's going. And that's for stormwater. Is there any way that we could have some discussion with Dallas to see if we might be able to put some stormwater from the east side into that?
Remember, you asked me about that, and I sent you that information. There's no, but that's to protect downtown, so it starts like in the Knox Henderson area, and it goes over a little bit to East
Okay.
Dallas.
I thought it was coming
It
through.
doesn't come all the way up.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Well, you know, I will say, it takes an awful lot to run a city, and when you get on city council, you have to instantly try to become somewhat of an expert in a whole bunch of things that you really weren't exposed to before. And, you know, it's one thing for us to sit here and say, yeah, we want to hold our taxes and we want to be prudent about how we spend the taxpayers' money. I always want to do that. We have some big projects that are ahead of us. The addition of 6 firefighters was not something that we had planned to do, but that has come up because of grant money. Looking forward, you know, 4 years from now, that's going to be a big hit to our budget because we're not hiring for 4 years. That's going to be an ongoing expense. So,
But we're also having new construction that will happen
Yes.
as well, that should help.
and hopefully with you know, their fees and whatnot that they're getting, inspection fees and whatnot, all that'll help to minimize some of that impact, but nevertheless, it's an impact. I do think that we need to carve out some money to have a participation plan for a Bagwell or Gabion program to try to incentivize those homeowners that aren't in the reaches that we're going to do, get them to take some proactive measures on their own property. And then, you know, we have to try to preserve property value as much as we can. And it's important to just think that as we talk about water detention and where we can do things on the east side, with the east side already being built out virtually, if we're talking about taking a piece of property and either taking down what's there and building a pond or whatever, that is taking away from the tax base of the city. And while doing it in one place doesn't sound like a whole lot, if we do it here, there, 5 or 6 places, that adds up. It nickel and dimes us in loss of red light camera revenue, taking properties off the tax roll. All these things add up, and that concerns me, but I'm trusting that you and Sherelle have enough knowledge to be able to make sure that that's not going to really impact us to a major extent. But I think about those things because I want to develop the city. I want to get property development and businesses paying property taxes and whatnot. I want to see property values go up. So you know, I just think about that, but, I came to this meeting maybe sort of like Mike, thinking, okay, we're gonna be able to maybe whittle this down a little bit and trim, so we could take some money and use it in other areas, but it's not always about that, and I realize that, so, I do think we have a good plan, and I'm just anxious to hear what the citizens will say in the next 2 budget meetings that they're afforded the opportunity to talk.
I did have 2 things I wanted to bring up in conversation that we had yesterday. Was I still want to explore the rehab program and what other cities are doing and come up with some type of, maybe if it's during a study session. I know that, you know, there's still a little bit of time, but I do want to explore some type of rehab program and the success of that in other cities.
A what program?
The rehab program
Okay.
as part of, you know, economic development. And then also, especially if we're going to be adding more funds to the demo rebuild. The other thing is that we talked about, and I was trying to pull up a grant program. A couple of meetings ago, we discussed that that's when we were allocating the funding for the chamber. We had several other nonprofits that were requesting funding. And so I do want to, and I was trying to pull up to see how much exactly. I know MetroCrest Social Services, we give them quite a bit, but they also help a lot. I think we as a city offset that, some of the things that other cities do internally with, you know, utility bill assistance and all of that. MetroCrest does that, which I think they're doing a fabulous job. But I think this is more of some of those, you know, I know we've donated to These Kids, and we had Just Because and a few others. So looking at how much we've allocated for those types of programs over the last 3 years, and see if we can maybe come up with a grant funding that's separate. It's small compared to our budget, but I do want to see if we can look at those numbers, like if it's 10,000, if it's 5,000, whatever that is, but then put that in a grant and then have it available to everybody, and then they can, maybe if it's a subcommittee, what have you, I'll defer to staff on what they think is best to select who would be the best individuals for that. And then also I would like to explore the addition of an inspector for a building inspection for a contract, with also making sure that we have certain, I don't want to say thresholds, but certain things that we want to make sure that they do. If it's, make sure that it's, 2-hour windows or 3-hour windows. But right now, I just don't think having that 5 to 6 hour window is a good service for our citizens. And so I do want to explore adding that additional building inspector, and as a contractor position, of course, because that would be, I definitely want to conserve our budget as much as possible. So I think those are a couple of the things I wanted staff to explore in this budget.
One thing on that grant program, I know, for example, the Farmers Branch Rotary Club has a timely grant program. So it's an amount of money that's put aside. It's for things that we're not exactly sure what could happen, but there's an opportunity. If there's groups that come forward, through the board, they can issue. So there are some groups that are maybe doing that already too. So one of the things we may look at is also maybe a referral program too. So if there's something that comes up, say with Just Because, maybe those could be referred to other organizations too. It doesn't have to be just the city.
Sure.
Because I know other organizations are looking at things like that.
They do, and it may be, it may be something where we could even have the Farmers Branch Chamber have the 5,000, and they have a quality of life committee, and have the quality of life committee make those decisions. I just want to make sure that the organizations that we're giving funding to are organizations that affect our Farmers Branch citizens. Because I know MetroCrest does stuff, I know the CFP Rotary does things, but they also cross other city lines. And so I should make sure whatever money we're giving affects our citizens directly. But that may be another opportunity to kind of enhance what the chamber's doing.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna continue to do that, and historically I've seen that we have, I do wanna kind of formalize that a little bit more, so we're not just because you know, some people may know about it, some people may not. There may be other nonprofits that maybe have a larger effect on our population, so. But yeah, I think that also can be another opportunity as well.
Did we fully, we haven't fully spent the fund balance, right? Where is the fund balance?
We just took 3 million out of it.
Yeah, we just took 3 million out of it.
Well, I want
After
to,
the million.
I want to know where we started.
Okay, this is, this, all right, and it's,
What is that?
okay, the fund balance, the estimated fund balance, on a most realistic basis is, the proposed budget is essentially 14.2 million bucks at the end of, this next fiscal year.
And what do we need to have?
And the target fund balance is, remember, there's a band, low and high, 15 to 20%. And that is 9.3 to 12.3. And 14.2 is what we're currently showing as most realistic. So anywhere between 14.2 and 9.3 would be conceivably you could use without posing.
Okay, so that's almost $5 million just over.
Correct.
Almost $5 million.
And 3 million of that, based on what I'm hearing, 3 million of that suggesting might be appropriate to move to the stormwater utility funds.
Does that number account for the $1 million made in emergency repairs?
The million is
No,
That's
the
in that.
emergency repair is already done.
I know, but. so
That's in this year's budget.
That's in that.
So I thought the 3 million included the
Yeah,
million
it
we've already
does.
spent.
Okay.
So that means there's 3 million left. That's
Two.
unallocated.
No.
Two.
No, because remember, the million isn't included, you already had this before we talked about that
Yeah.
million. So there's $5 million difference. We've allocated 3 of it if y'all want to go with that route.
I thought the
One of which is already
million
spent.
was already done in this year's budget.
No, the million, we just did that at like a meeting or 2 ago. So you already had this book. So it's not shown here yet.
Maybe I'm asking the wrong question.
So
We've already, this council, not me, because I was recused, didn't they already allocate $1 million?
yeah. So.
Is there another million that I don't know?
So the
about?
targeted ending budget was 14.2, but since this was printed, we've allocated $1 million, so really where we're gonna end is 13.2.
Correct.
Got it.
And
That makes more sense.
now, we're
Yes.
talking that.
Yes.
And you're comfortable as a city manager going down to the low end because we have an increasing tax base?
Well, 3 million doesn't take you down to the low end. You still have, it kind of takes you in between the two. Yes,
But we haven't spent the other 2 yet,
correct.
which we could. So we still got $2 million.
Yeah, what's gonna happen next year though, is that target number is gonna change, because last year, the high end of the target was like 11, but because our budget,
As a whole goes up.
Yeah.
rose 10%, and then the target rose 10%,
Right.
that range.
Correct.
So next year, likely, the low end will be
A little bit higher.
10, closer to 10,
Right.
and the high end will be
Closer to 13.
closer to
But
13 or
we'll,
14.
we'll be accruing that through revenues, right?
Well, only through unspent revenues.
Right.
Only through unspent expenditures, right? Or overmatched revenues. The difference, if we get more revenues and we spend what we're targeted, then that number will grow next year, and if we
I hear you, but so all I'm
spend
asking is do we want to leave the 2 million there and have it be more towards the mids or potentially spend 2 million and take us down to the low and allow it to grow over time?
Well,
But if we-
in terms of usage of fund balance, or the council can make that decision anytime.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So, you know, I think we all agree the 3 million will help us pay for the repairs that we know on the books right now.
the Freeze and Nichols repairs on Farmers Branch Creek, and a big chunk of what the Cooks Creek. And that will, in the meantime, allow us to go forward with the Freeze and Nichols study about optimal places to put detention ponds, and then when that comes back in, then we're going to have a secondary discussion about, okay, how to, what's going to be our plan in terms of buying properties and creating more detention ponds. That would be another opportunity to use either fund balance plus some other pool of money.
If we're doing-
Save the flexibility.
Yeah.
Which is why cutting some expenses right now, if we were able to pull some expenses out of the budget, would replenish that fund next year.
So in 6 months from now, if something happens, we as a council can vote to spend some of that, those funds that we have not spent.
Correct.
Okay. And so in those 2 million, are we going to be taking out the 300,000 for the playgrounds as well?
But I don't know if anybody has the balls.
The additional
No,
300?
300
Are we
would
just
not come
gonna-
from fund balance. We talked about the additional aquatic center revenues yesterday, so I
Okay.
need to explore that. I think we can come up with.
Oh, okay,
300,
without having to really.
Without having to dip into fund balance.
Got it.
I was of the opinion that we weren't gonna move forward with the rec center until he relooked it to see, is this really the great plan, not as opposed to the plan we think we can do today.
Because
We said we'd do it 1 year and then reevaluate and look at, because there was that grant matching strategy
Right.
to see where that was and to see how that evolves before we commit to another year.
So we're not gonna be knocking on any walls until after that.
Correct.
Good.
Once they get the grants, maybe potential to come back and ask for matching components of it, but we don't know until.
And the rec center plan was over 3 years. It was gonna be 400 a year for 3 years. But if we get the grant, that would speed that up to 1.
If we put some grant funding there and we just had a committee of somebody on the council or staff as maybe kind of a leader, and we asked for each Rotary Club and each Chamber of Commerce to provide a committee member to do that, to make the selection. Let them choose what is the most beneficial
What are you talking about?
of the slush fund. I'm sorry, I'm.
They were talking about that grant funding that we were talking about?
Yeah, the grant funding.
Yeah.
Right, and let them do it, and that might also inspire them to add money to it, right?
If you change subjects, he was talking about the rec center.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Right, so-
We
I
went
think
from
your
the
idea
Greeks
is
to the
good.
rec
I
center.
was like, oh,
I'm trying to.
I'm sorry.
that's all right, that's all right.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea though for the smaller organizations, to get a wider audience.
I gotta
Yeah, I
eat,
thought-
I gotta eat next month.
I thought one of the things we did when we took a look at that funding is we said, okay, we've got a set amount of money. And we had organizations like Bees Kids, and so few individuals, and service was redundant with what another organization was doing. And so we chose not to fund some things. And, we've already taken a step, we've given pledged another $215,000 to MetroCrest of taxpayer money. And I think we tread on shaky ground there in some respects doing that. Because
My understanding from the.
I was gonna disagree just from the standpoint of we put 15,000 against Keep Farmers Branch Beautiful.
Which was to fund the main thing.
Yeah, well, and so, I see this as kind of similar. It's that when we see somebody step forward in Farmers Branch that says, hey, I'm gonna help the community and I need a little bit of funding to do it, then it causes that opportunity to take a look and say, yeah, this one, but not these other two, that kind of thing. That's the only thing I saw.
well, no, I agree, and I think there needs to be
I know.
a better way to evaluate all this, because we make it sort of on the fly as we're sitting there.
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
Yeah,
She's saying-
and that's what I'm saying, like, let's
Yeah.
create a more efficient program, and it may be something we can just table and talk about during the study session,
Yes.
and then that way we can
Yeah.
just,
Let's move that to where we can have.
Yeah, the direction we had from when we talked about this with council was $5,000 would be kind of a competitive fund, and we were tasked with coming up with criteria for that. We were gonna come back in the fall, because that's not in the budget.
Right.
We're gonna come back in the fall with a criteria for that to move forward on a go-forward basis.
Awesome.
The other part in organizational funding, one of the factoids we come is, okay, the dollars per versus the number of people that are impacted by those dollars. And so if you want to come up with a prioritization of what organizations serve the most efficiently, we have that data. And if we want to have that criteria, we can bring that forward and council can do that. So we can do that in a future study session. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. 7:53.
Didn't want to get bogged down in $5,000. So,
So where are we?
So the strategy on the stormwater utility fund at this point sounds reasonable to move forward.
what is the strategy?
Okay, the strategy is
You're out, right.
I know.
taking $3 million, which includes $1 million of the loan that we just made, and say that's forgiven. It's just going to be a $3 million over to the stormwater utility fund to handle, to kind of fast track existing Freeze and Nichols repairs along Farmers Ranch Creek, plus some significant inroads towards the Cooks Creek improvements since we didn't get the grant. Immediately start on a Freeze and Nichols study to find detention ponds and come back to council as soon as we have that information with a financing strategy and the potential to use additional general fund balances that are above our minimum target level in the general fund. Is that could be an option in the council in the future. I've not gotten any more information about just leaving the stormwater utility rate at the 15% recommended increase that the committee recommended, with the thought that we'll reevaluate that based on the Freeze and Nichols study.
What about we didn't get the Cooks Creek grant, so we definitely need to come put together a plan to.
That's part of that $3 million.
He's got it, yeah.
Perfect.
350,000 a year.
You know, in terms of fast tracking, slowing down the water, that detention pond on Brookhaven is a nice thing to start with, and we can start with immediately. But the Bella Road is in that mix, and I'm not getting really good direction about where we want to go with Bella Road. Do we want to move that forward or not? Or do we need to come up with something else?
We probably have 2 or 3 more conversations.
Okay.
But it seems to be that the conversation is trending towards doing that, hearing the conversation from UDR and their willingness to work with us on their future development, and Brookhaven's commitment to work with us on that detention pond, creating that connection, I think is going to create the most value in that area. And as Mark highlighted, I mean, the area that they're developing is small, but they have entertained the idea of when they're already digging a hole, maybe just dig it a little bit deeper. You know,
I'd like to understand what that detention pond is really gonna do. If it's 5% help, then, I would say yes.
You're looking at under 2 acres of 40, so 5%.
But if it's 1% help, then I would say, I wouldn't want to exchange Bella Road for it, right? And, and we have this thing, had a conversation with John about asking them to pump more water. These are little things that, we should certainly be leveraging this against getting them to pump a couple extra hours of water and electricity that we're willing to pay for.
Keep in mind, that's a 1-year problem.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have total control of that well.
Yeah.
So I don't want to start getting others ruffled all the way around over a 1-year issue. So
I'll make a call to
Yeah, but the point is, we need to find out what the benefit of what that pond will be.
Well, there's some sewer line and gas lines through there that we need to understand the depths of those.
Yeah.
That impacts how big or wide this detention pond could be. So we need to understand those limitations. It's going to take a little bit more time, but we are working on that. And I mean, I'm going to go back to what I've felt from the beginning on this issue, which is I am still in favor of leveraging the stormwater fund and taking it up to, I would say 10 million, because of what you said the other day. We're at all-time low rates. A bank can take that on without having to jump through all these additional hoops. It can give Mark the additional funding he needs to streamline a lot of these things. We can do all the work. You can roll Cooks Creek into that, and it can leave us a little bit extra money for future detention ponds. And if you're talking about acquiring 40 acres of detention ponds on the east side, that's a big number. And that's not gonna be coming from the general fund, I promise you that, because you're buying buildings. And so when I look at that, I look at also the stormwater fund rate increase. You know, I think it should, most of that fund should apply to the people that are causing the problems, which is the areas on the east side that don't have any green space, you know? And it shouldn't be fully on the residents, and is there some way to, you know, manipulate that fee to where that becomes some of it? Because what gets people to take action, it's pressure on rates, and who do we need to take action? People over there, and it's gonna take a little while to get this detention kind of study done, where we need to be,
Yeah.
where we need to identify these things, but we have other problems that we need to fix, and that's why I'm in favor of, you know, the amount of money that you've added to that fund. I mean, if you did a, you know, 15, 20-year payment, it wouldn't have to be as substantial to take care of some of that stuff, at least from a leverage side, because the improvements we're gonna be looking to make are long-term. These aren't 1 or 2 year fixes and then we have to come back. This is for stabilization, but then we can still use some of the other fund, you know, if we don't have to use all of it because we're doing pay-as-you-go. You know, I look at it as, okay, there's some more money for your bag wall program, there's some more money for some of the other things, and so that's where I'm at on that issue. That's how I feel about it. I can be maybe convinced otherwise, but right now I haven't heard an argument that has made me move off of that point. And the good thing is if y'all decide otherwise, you don't have to worry about my vote.
What's the
So-
downside from the city manager's perspective? I mean, we can just go in and issue the debt, is it'd be a CO kind of debt base, or is it's fund supported, right? So it's not there's no tax increase, there's no impact on that.
You would still, to get the good interest rate, you would still back it with, ultimately with property taxes, but it would be considered self-supporting, just like the landfill that we issue for 5 years.
Right.
We did the same thing,
But it'd
COs.
be a CO then.
Yeah.
It'd be a CO.
Bronson.
So, you know, this is kind of where I was coming into this whole thing, is that we were gonna issue debt based on the revenue that fund takes in. And, you know, there's no reason why we couldn't replicate exactly what we did at the Scale House and do a 5-year or a 7-year or 8-year deal where we're applying $1.5 million or $2 million at the fundraise. What's the fundraise now?
$1.5 million.
$1.5.
What's the new rate gonna be? What's the new rates in there?
Well, it's, every 10% is $150,000.
Okay, so
So
whatever
it's
it is,
15%, so it's $225,000.
okay, so, you know, $1 million a year, if it goes back and we could do a 10-year note on it, and it pays itself, it pays back the $10 million or so that we were to raise, and
But all of that money's, right now, currently, that money is all spoken for.
right, but if we leverage for a $10 million bond, that takes care of all the money that is spoken for, correct? Because then it takes and pays all that, there's some left over, and then now we use $1 million of it to pay back the bond, and the other $500,000 can do the other little ancillary pieces, or am I completely missing?
I thought it was 101.5 million on top of what the fund has already been generating.
Oh, no.
No, it's generating
It's going from
1.5 million.
1.2 to 1.5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bringing in a, it's not,
It's always been like 1.1, and then it went up a little bit with
yeah,
I want to revisit those numbers, that's not what I saw on there, but okay.
and that's why, like a 10-15% doesn't hit the residents very much, it impacts the commercial
Right.
higher.
it's like 750 on the resident.
But even if you went up 100%, you're bringing in $1.5 million more, which, that's not pocket change, but it's still, if you're looking at potentially, if it's $1 million an acre, that's $40 million bucks. And that's just to buy the land.
If we took the stormwater tax up 50%, it would not be inconsequential. And we have a good reason. I mean, we got pictures that we can show residents.
I mean, what's
about
the
impact.
pain threshold on the business side? Because that's where the rate's going to be impacted the most. You're a business owner.
We felt the last one, and we're not like a gigantic water user, but, you know, I was like, whoa, okay.
Well, it's not based on your water usage.
Well, it's based on the size of our, but I thought it was until.
Based on your footprint of impervious area.
We're solid, we're concrete.
You're all concrete.
All concrete. I mean, but except for a small little side
You're
yard.
part of the problem.
Did
Hold on, Mike.
what kind of, I was gonna say, what kind of savings did you get from the insurance change?
Oh, like $9,000 a year.
9,000?
Yeah, it was a big deal. Huge. We're unsprinkler.
Right.
It was a huge deal. I still love that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of unsprinkler buildings, so we're 70% unsprinkled, right? Over there? And the building's kind of like my type?
A lot of
70%?
buildings need sprinklers.
Yeah.
Sure. Terry?
So can you pass, or can you increase the tax differently for different areas? Or would you have to go to a different taxing unit.
Yeah, you can do a public improvement district and do an assessment, but the problem with, stormwater utility, the fee is kind of similar to the water and sewer rates. You can't have separate water and sewer rates. You have to be consistent in how you handle your, it's a utility rate, and so you have to be consistent in how you apply the utility rate across the city.
Well, 2 years ago, we had a different rate for business than we did for residential. We did that, we split that out 2 years ago.
Yeah, but it's based on on stormwater, it's based on the impervious nature of the property. So
It's the way it's assessed, not it.
Yeah, so what we've done is we had GIS maps, and we calculated for every parcel for commercial, and so every commercial building could have a separate fee. But it's based off of, it's a multiplier of the residential, because the residential is so many, because residential is averaged into 3 groups, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and it's, and I think we looked at like the medium impervious nature of a residential, and it's a multiplier that applies to the commercial side based on their actual measurements. So they're all connected. So to try and say, okay, on top of that, just the east side is going to have all that's not going to. You have to have when you're establishing a utility rate, you have to have some kind of a justification, a fair way of how you came up with that number, other than say you're double. And so that's why you can't really do it geographically different.
So the $10 million figure's been mentioned, but we don't need 10. We
couldn't need more.
6 for what Mark wants to do.
Well, I'm looking at like immediate, and then to buy land, that's a whole other, that's a whole different
immediate, I think we're covered immediate.
Yeah.
We're well covered immediate.
But that's taking out of the current budget though, right?
Taking out the fund.
That's a general fund balance.
My point was going to be, I know we're going to need extra money to buy, but for the repairs that Mark wants to make, and if we wanted to do this all in 1 year, we need about $6 million, right?
Correct.
In 1 year.
Yeah.
Okay. With the cost of funds now being at pretty much a low point, would it make sense to borrow that 6, or is that too low of an amount?
Well, with the strategy, the strategy that has now been outlined using the fund balance, I mean, you're talking about being able to do that all within 2 years. And Mark's already said that he can, he cannot do $6 million all in 1 year. We don't have the resources to do that.
He could if he had the
Engineers.
people, which the
Yeah, because I asked
funding
him that
to pay for it.
specifically, I tried to press him, because he knows,
Yeah.
we want to get this thing done. But what Terry just said is exactly what Robert just said, but Robert, 6 million, 10 million.
Well, I just used a bigger number because,
Because why do you want to do a small inch?
Yeah.
well, I just look at it like, well, what else could you do? And you don't have to use it all.
Yeah.
But you don't want to go to the market for a 2-year, you need money for 2 years.
I'm not a fan of bringing the reserve down to the bare minimum.
We're borrowing money at 3% and we're getting 0.5%.
And that's not the bare minimum, you start $2 million above the bare minimum.
I'm trying to spend that 2 million.
Yeah.
Nobody's on board.
Okay, here's what I know.
So far.
Lunch is ready. If we want to break, grab food, and come back, we can continue the conversation. And that'll help us to move along things, if that's the direction y'all want to go.
You have to be quick because you're gone.
Or
You're gone in 20 minutes.
We haven't had the tax rate discussion, or maybe we can have that next week.
Did we come here to talk about tax rates?
Is the food still going to be warm in 20 minutes?
I think so. I'm gonna see what
Or
it
do you
is.
want to be able to grab food?
Let me go see what it is. I think it's fajitas.
Let's go ahead and bring it in here.
All right,
Yeah, the tax rate would be part of that conversation, you're right.
we'll do that. 12:08.
I have to leave in 20 minutes.
Whoever wants to.
I want to point out, I stand corrected on something. Sherelle and her team were able to, the budget includes the $1,086,000
The what?
that was advanced to the stormwater utility fund. So,
I just couldn't believe we got it done so quickly after that.
yeah,
So that was current year money.
correct. It was current year money and reflected in this page.
Okay.
I didn't think it was
So
reflected.
then we're only transferring 2 million out then.
Correct.
Right, not 3 million, so that gives us, there's actually 3 million fund balance left if we do that.
That is true.
It'll take us to 12.2, which is right where at the high end of our budget.
I feel justified.
I should have listened to you.
No, never do that on the budget. I'm going to stand corrected on the budget.
But that's all I wanted to point out.
Do y'all want to stay in stormwater, or y'all thinking a little bit of the tax rate discussion, so Christophe can hear some of that?
Christophe, do you have a priority that you'd like to weigh in on?
Whether stormwater
Or anything else that's still on our pending list, the tax rate?
I kind of already talked a lot about what I have on my list. I wasn't there, Norwood and I weren't there for that discussion, so if it's okay, I would like for you to just kind of give us again just a summary of that discussion, and then your thoughts on whether we kind of keep the repercussions from keeping it the way they are as far as SB2 goes, going higher, going lower. I kind of want to see what, from a city perspective, what the repercussions would be in each, based on each decision.
Well, the discussion where the max tax rate is set, the proposed budget is keeping the current tax rate. If you go down to the effective tax rate, that wasn't that about a $400,000 difference?
If you go to the,
No,
imagine,
the other way. No, the effective rate versus the proposed rate.
Yeah, it was about 400.
Yeah, $400,000. But what's helping us is the new construction. This new construction is not capped. And so, at some point, new construction is going to end.
Exactly.
And so at that point, you're capped. So, the thought process is that for most of the cities in Texas is the higher level you can adopt right now, just mathematically, than the 3.5% when it goes into effect next year or the year after next, then it will be off of a higher number. That's just the math thought. So that will help, that could help delay the impact of the cap.
But even though we stay at our own rate, the cities that are upping theirs are still, some of them are still even lower than what we currently have, right?
And so another strategy that some cities are looking at is they're looking at actually adopting just below their current rollback rate, which is 8% right now. And that, when the city council met to discuss establishing a max rate, that's what they said, it's the 61 cents, just so that we can have a full range of conversations. If for whatever reason council wanted to go up the highest amount possible, setting a high amount for future capping, the 61 cents would be that. If you went from the current proposed rate to 61 cents, that's about another $700,000 per year that you'd have ongoing. And the thought was, is part of this discussion is, you know, is that money that the city could allocate to something of use? And so that's kind of the benchmark there.
Not that it matters, but I was not in favor of that conversation that night. I was in favor of put the tax rate, the maximum tax rate, the effective tax rate.
The revenue generation differential between our 59-cent and the effective tax rate is $958,000.
That's what I calculated, yeah, 958. And, you know, so I'll talk a little bit about it. So I came into this and I kind of have a number in my head, and I'm kind of, I've learned a lot in the last couple of years with the budget, and, you know, I feel like that there's a lot of money in the budget, and there's a lot of opportunity coming up in the next few years for our new construction to continue to benefit our rate and our budget in that wouldn't be subject to the SB2 provisions because it's obviously new construction. So, I'm kind of steadfast on, I'm not saying being unprecedented, but making sure the residents know that we're going to give them what they need, what they want. But we're also going to take an aggressive approach with our taxes to make sure that, John made a very good point when we said we're gaming the system. The other night, that 61-cent vote, that's gaming the system. And that's what other communities are doing around here. They're gaming the system to figure out what they can put the rate to establish that new high for them. And I kind of, wholeheartedly disagree with that. I feel like there's a lot of things in the budget that are great amenities. There are obviously a lot of things to continue the great service that we do. And if we got into a crunch, obviously we would have a second look at some of those amenities and how they're funded and whatnot. So and that will be a conversation that future councils will have to deal with long after all of us are all gone. And it's just the nature of the beast of SB2. But that doesn't mean that we need to follow suit and artificially inflate our rate because we're scared of the future. I think we sit here and we're given the task to take a hard look at everything and make sure that it all makes sense and it all adds up. And for me, I look at it as, and I look at all the different numbers. I mean, there was another 777 in the library that we don't even know if we're going to need. And that's just, again, that's 2/3 of the 958K that keeping it at the effective rate would achieve. So, I've kind of taken I don't want to call it a hardline stance on it, but that's kind of my number. Obviously I've been known to be the wolf, lone wolf of the group, and you know what? That's just kind of the way it is. But at the same time, I feel like there's going to be a lot of growth in the next few years. I believe beyond the third year even. We're looking at a significant amount of growth as these things come on, and even the changes that we just made out on the west side are going to have a change on. Obviously it took $221,000 a year out of Allison's hot tax, but at the same time we're going to bring on other opportunities that have other values and other sales tax implications, and I think that's a positive change. But I don't necessarily think that just because we can do it, we do it. I don't find, we can argue philosophically about coming into a capped environment. I'm sure Charles and I could forever, that you just don't do this. But at the same time, there's no way for us to calculate last year what was going to happen this year. And look what happened this year. And we know it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again. And it's one of those things that's why I was very in tune with leveraging the stormwater fund, so we didn't have to use the funds to do that. And we could do the same thing we do with the what do you call it, house, the scale house, and leverage the scale house royalties and whatnot and the fees to pay the bond off. And look, we're just doing just that. So that was kind of my approach. Obviously we didn't talk about it till just today, but that's how I felt that, my most comfortable way to handle the needs for the stormwater. And trust me, I know that there are issues, and I know it's there, and I believe that we can leverage the stormwater fund and make it make it something that benefits all the creek owners. And I know the issues are up where my office is, so I see it. I mean, all the water falls in the streets and has nowhere to go. So, with that being said, that, I've kind of got a number in my brain, and, it's kind of where my, maybe the next council meeting, I'll go put some tape on the floor, and I'll just say, this is where I'm at.
I agree a lot with what Bronson's saying. I don't know that I can go all the way down to the effective, but the number in my head is 589999. So almost a 1 cent. Decrease, because I look at the same things, the same opportunities that we have that not a lot of other communities are facing outside of Frisco, McKinney, some of the others. Carrollton doesn't have the growth that we have, Addison doesn't have the growth that we have, or what's coming in front of them the way that we do. And I think that we're better positioned to capitalize on some of that, and just thinking about things that maybe a little bit differently would allow us to not only take this step in face of some of the challenges that we have, but also allow us to still accomplish all the goals that we want to. We just have to think a little bit differently about it, and as Bronson outlined, that's kind of where I'm at, and that's just my thoughts. And, you know, I can be persuaded over the next few weeks with some more conversation, but just my review of the budget, where we're at, the conversation these past few days, that's kind of, after some thinking, is where I'm kind of shaking out on this, at least right now.
58999,
Yep.
that would be a $586,000 reduction in tax revenue.
I'll just talk, because I came in, you know, I wasn't at the meeting where you guys talked about this. I don't know that I would have supported the 61, but maybe I would, based on the conversation.
That number
And so I kind of came into it like thinking, well, let's keep it about the same as it was last year. But I remember last year, and we had the, you know, it was a reduction, and we're the only one in North Texas that had a reduction, right? And we've got enough money in the fund balance to cover $500,000. We've got enough money in the fund balance to cover $900,000. And it sends a great message to our citizens that, hey, we're trying to get effective, efficient, cost-effective, fiscally conservative management of our city if we decrease the tax rate. So, you know, I could see myself being convinced, you know, to go with what Robert just said or what Ronson just said. But, you know, I think we need to really think hard about, you know, we certainly don't want to go up. And the only thing that came to mind as I was listening to you guys is that this $10 million May issuance. And the last time we had the bond, we absorbed it. And what would it take to absorb that again? I don't know, because is that bond issuance going to force us to go up the next year on the tax rate, or are we going to be able to play with the numbers to figure it out? I don't know the answer to that, but I'd like to know the answer. What's the impact of that May issuance on our tax rate, if any?
It's already baked into the cake.
It is.
Yeah, we specifically planned on the debt service schedule to kind of flow with, so that it wouldn't increase our.
Okay, so it has no impact. Good.
It has no impact,
Then-
but it could.
You know, I'd really like to see if we can't have a reduction. Now, last year we didn't, our reduction was like in the 10,000 place or something like that. It wasn't, you know, a real significant thing, but it sent the right message. And I'd like to send that message again.
Mike, hold on 1 second. I mean, can we?
So, yeah, I'm gonna.
She's
if I
got to
can-
leave right after this,
yes.
so.
I just want us to really think about, so this last session, they were actually wanting to go lower with that tax rate. We don't know what's gonna happen this next session. There may be somebody that wants to pass something to make the rate even lower. We don't know what's going to happen. What I wouldn't want to do is to, you know, years from now, let's say this continues and then there's no legislation that trumps it, that changes it, to put our city council in a position where there are more needs, we have no more construction, and then our hands are tied. And, you know, I'm for, I can be swayed either way. I think with knowing that the 1 million is in our budget, that gives us 3 to work with. So absorbing that 500,000 to go with the rate that was proposed by Rob, or that he's wanting, I think is, we can do that. I'm leaning more towards keeping it the way it is. Definitely looking at, when I came on and working with other cities, it's about long-term strategic planning and making sure that we plan for 10, 20, 30 years from now. So if there's a way for us to find a mechanism to have some type of rainy day funding or things like that, because we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, I would rather us do that now than have to take away from some of our amenities that people come to Farmers Branch for. So I just want us to think about that, to make sure that we leave our council that will be here way after we're gone, with the right tools and mechanisms in place that they're able to, you know, move things around or leverage some of their funding, and not have their hands tied because of some of the decisions that we made. So I just want us to think about that long-term strategic planning. And like I said, I can be swayed either way, but me coming into this position, the thing I kept saying was, you know, we need to really think about this long-term strategic planning. So that so things like the flood control and the drainage plan and, you know, the 35 corridor plan are really important. And so anyhow, sorry I have to leave, but thank you all.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and one thing we're forgetting about is we've already taken away from the council in 5 years, 1 cent, because they got a $600,000 burden that's gonna roll, in terms of long-term thinking. If we cut now, in fact, we've already taken 1 cent away from their budget, long-term for commitment that we're making for 5 years from now. So,
That assumes nothing can be cut.
no, yeah. Well, I think we can cut stuff, but
And we can always cut stuff. We'll have to look at prioritization and obligations versus, the amenities and all of that. Of course, we can, but I know a lot of people are moving here for different reasons. A lot of it is our parks, a lot of it is our infrastructure, proximity and things like that.
And how much money can Mike generate if we give him 5 more years?
the other thing that I learned here, and correct me if I'm wrong, we say we absorbed that bond. Really, we only absorbed $5 million of that bond because the other $10 million hasn't been issued.
But it's factored into our debt service schedule.
The whole 15 is factored in. I mean, we're not paying it, it's not coming out of our budget.
No, it's factored in, because when we put it in 2 phases, we came up with a debt service schedule where we paid, on the second phase, we pay very little principal, mainly interest, to be able to flow in with the existing. So we adjusted the schedule to make it work.
Yeah, because we haven't issued the other 10 million.
We haven't issued it, so we did it based on the premise of, here is the way that we could keep the debt service the same without changing the tax rate. That was a verbal commitment, that's not a legal commitment. The council could still say, to hell with that, we're gonna go up
Can I not do that?
a penny.
If I can't, if I can't.
But, in terms of reducing a penny on the tax rate, that's not out of the realm of possibility at all. I just want to let you know that, as the budget is proposed to you, the growth is predominantly aimed towards the personnel that you saw and capital improvements. So to take $500,000 or $600,000 out of there, that's where I would look first, because those are the adds to the budget.
Why wouldn't you look at that library, $770,000 expenses?
No, that would be the first.
Yeah.
But I will
That's
tell you,
half of
but I
what
will tell you that we all agree that the renovations are going to be more than zero. They're probably going to be,
You're
and
right.
so what we're talking about is just getting back to that philosophical discussion. I was hoping to do pay-as-you-go. That's what this is premised upon. If the council doesn't want to go that route, if we're just going to issue, you could lower the tax rate a penny today, but you're going to issue debt tomorrow for those library renovations, and the tax rate goes right back up. So that's just that'll be the philosophy of council.
Pay me now or pay me later.
Well, I remember saying in my town hall that, that it wasn't zero, and it was 24 or it was something, that was non-zero. And so I feel comfortable saying that, hey, if we get this thing and the citizens agree, we do all this sensing and all that kind of stuff, that it's an 8 million or whatever, that, hey, just issue a seal for that, or put it on the ballot.
I'm hoping after this process is not next year. It's the year after when we really have the information. And then you talk about figuring out a year of design if we hire an architect, and then you're talking about something that maybe not being built until, or ready to go till 2025, which is, there's a lot of things that have occurred in our tax rate since then. A lot of things, there's debt that's rolled off in that time as well. So, I don't think of it as, it would be a negative thing, but it would be something that they were, that they wanted and chose through the involvement. Like I said, I want there to be a task force that's got 50 residents on it that go through and make sure that, no book is unturned, no stone is unturned. And so that's the whole point and the idea. But it's, like I said, if there's not a lot of difference between a cent and mine's $1.50 basically. So, but it shows a lot. It shows that we've got their back and we're looking to make sure that we provide them the leanest Farmers Branch we can, that still provides them what they're looking for. And I've got full faith that if we were to all draw a line in the sand, you could do it. I really do. I think that there's enough. You could do it, and I don't think it's going to, upset employees. I don't think it's going to upset anyone. I think we're going to continue on, and You know, we're gonna take out some of that pay-as-you-go, I think, is where it would come from, and some of the future pay-as-you-go stuff, and I think that would be because the SB2 is aimed at stopping the pay-as-you-go philosophical idea. And so that is what why not start weaning away from it now and start moving towards.
Or you can immortalize and say, there is a way to continue pay-as-you-go. Right now.
61.
But if you, the proposed budget at the current tax rate, just using, say, 500,000, if that $500,000 for that additional penny that you're talking about, that's baked in from now on. So that's pay-as-you-go money from now on that accumulates over time.
Let's assume no other council ever decides to lower the rate.
Yeah, but
In the future. And I look at it as what Bronson's saying is, you know, with SB2, I don't know if we're going to be able to absorb another bond
Ever
going forward again, because the dollar amounts of these bonds are so large and they're only getting larger because costs continue to go up, that it's going to have to be an increase. So with some of that said, if these are things that the citizens want, these are things the citizens will now be forced to vote on, and get a voice in that increase. And at least from here, if we have the ability to do something now to just make that amount start from a lower place as we look forward, and with the growth in front of us, there still might be a way to continue that growth, especially, you know, if we're flipping the east side to higher and better use. I mean, there's a ton of value over there that's not being realized right now. There's a ton of value along 635 that's not being realized right now. There's a ton of value along 35 that's not being realized right now. And when you look at all those opportunities, you know, I feel as long as we stay the course and we create an area where people want to continue to be and invest, and there's still an abundant amount of opportunity in front of us to take advantage of having the new construction and the new values on the rolls that are equal or greater than what that 3.5% is that not everyone's always going to have.
Right. You know what I just heard in your comments is I heard that lowering the rate right now gives the residents a louder and more impactful voice in the coming future, because they're going to have to get the opportunity to vote. They're going to get the opportunity. I promise you, they're going to vote at some point in the next 10 years on a tax rate, because it's the way it is. And now we've just made their voice louder. We've made their ability to affect these 6 people better.
Or separate by it.
Or however many.
With the,
Terry, you haven't spoken.
I'm trying to absorb what everybody's saying here. I originally thought, in giving this my cursory glance a week ago, that I would have liked to have seen a slight reduction in the tax rate. But then I look at the projects that are facing us and what the funding mechanism is going to be to do it without having to issue debt. Because anytime you issue debt, it's going to be more expensive money. The talk was made about the library and $700,000. I think the citizens were pretty clear. They didn't want a new library. They expect you to start doing something on the existing library now. And we know that repairs need to be done now. And we should address that now with the money that we have. There's $1 million in the budget for salaries and step and merit. That still concerns me. It's a lot of money. I want to do the right thing by certainly our sworn employees. And I'll probably have some conversation with you to figure out, okay, what is that and where are these numbers not connecting? But there's $1 million right there if we don't do anything. So these are very tough decisions to have and, or to make, I should say. I feel that we need to start on the creek. I'd like to see that ramped up faster, just so it's not hanging over our heads so long, and that we can move on to other projects, or other creeks, because they're gonna need work too. But I don't have that answer. I don't know what, at this point now, because I've heard so much information, I'm not sure where we can affect additional savings in this budget. But I know the biggest one that I'm looking at is with the salary. And I'm not saying that I'm going to propose that, but I just say it's an area of opportunity, just as there are others in here. I would like to think that we could do better holding the tax rate. It's not going to lower my taxes because my appraised value is going up, and paying the same rate, at the same tax rate, I'm still paying more. I worry about some residents being taxed out of being able to live in the city, but that's more market driven than anything else in my mind. So I just need time, more time to digest what's going on here, and maybe look at some things that I heard about yesterday that I hadn't really considered.
Speaking to the point you just made about your concern for some of the residents in this town and being taxed out, I would actually also be in support of one of Bronson's ideas, which is, go ahead, man, it's your deal. Finish that food though.
Increasing the senior exemption.
$10,000.
I totally forgot about that, man.
I think that's one of the things that came up during our budget process last year. And there's a time frame by which you have to declare that.
And we passed that.
Yeah,
for
we
this
passed that
coming
for
year.
this particular time.
Same answer as last year, damn. Okay, well.
We could do it for next year.
Yeah, we could make the policy now for next year that it's going up 10,000.
So,
Well,
Yeah, that's if people want, I mean,
let's see
whatever
what
they
that
want.
amount, let's see what that is, and what that amount is, and how that affects. I'm gonna sit here and say, yes, let's do it. I wanna see some numbers that support.
Yeah, I'd like to see that come back as a study session item.
Yeah,
in
before
the
the
future.
so,
Yeah, before the date,
so here's.
with a big red star that said by this date.
Here's something I worry about, you know, we've just come through 10 years of expansion. But I lived through the early 80s in the business, you know, I had to give a house back to the bank. You know, 2008, you know, a recession in the 90s. Charles has run finances through that. The market, the interest rate, I guess, I'm sure y'all saw the market yesterday dropped about 800 points, and the reason is the 10-year bond was below the 2-year bond, and every time that's happened in the past, you know, recession has hit. And, you know, we have great momentum, we're in a great place, we've got a lot of things in the works that will continue, but, you know, when the recessions hit, property values will drop, and it will take a long time, and they'll drop fast, and they'll rise slowly. And we do have a lot of significant challenges. You know, the library is going to cost us millions. You know, you could argue whether that's 2 million or 10 million, but it's going to cost us millions, somewhere in between that. We still don't know with the creek issue what that's going to cost. We don't even know if the work that we've done you know, we could get a couple of major storms and we could find out that, you know, it still wasn't enough and we need to put a dam in, and that could be a couple of more $1 million. You know, or, and other things will come up. You know, something will happen and that will cost money. And I look at it, you know, we've already made, like I said, a $600,000 commitment. That it's $600,000 in today's dollars, but in 5 years, it'll be closer to 700. It will mirror the growth in the rate of a cent, right? It's basically a cent today, 600 and whatever. But as our salaries have, firemen salaries have increased faster than the rate of the general fund. Historically, I just, I think, and I think it's admirable, and maybe we want to do something token, you know, and I could support a token to 59.75, or you know, something along that line. But I think it's looking long range. And not knowing, you know, the state's not going to raise the cap. I think it's, you know, of course, I'm the old guy, you know, I won't be around to see it, but I think it's very risky. And it's very risky, and it could force us down the path to make cuts that are emergency cuts and services, and not necessarily the best place to make it when you know, because they're the most expedient. Because when you start cutting, you start looking for places to cut. You know, I think it's, I think there's too much uncertainty in the future right now to make a significant cut that's going to be $500,000 to $900,000 for plus, because every year if the values do go up, this goes on for eternity until somebody votes in a tax increase.
Well, I would make a token cut to make a joke that we have too many serious infrastructure needs that are facing us.
Yeah.
And the dollars, we need to have the dollars there. And so that's what I'm wrestling with right now. And I would rather maintain rate and have that money with the ability to spend versus having to issue debt, if at all possible. But I'm sure that there's still places to cut within the budget that could free up more dollars to go towards those infrastructure repairs, and so that's what I want to noodle more on.
Yeah.
Well, if we go with what Robert proposed, and we don't do the landscaping at Fire Station number 2, it's basically a wash, right? I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm just saying that if we have the ability to do it, maybe I'm naive, but I don't believe it's as dire as it might have been painted. And it doesn't mean you can't go up on your tax rate. It just means that you have to put it to a vote. And that's a pain in the ass.
I think the idea was behind it was to give residents more of a say. We talk about transparency and this and that, and I think this gives them the ultimate level of transparency. They're going to have more say than they've ever had, and have more ability to be in the driver's seat for their tax rate to determine what funding level their city's at, and what, you know, if we have if our residents are comfortable with a certain level of service, like they've made very clear, then they're going to make sure that they vote to keep that level going. And I don't think that it's I don't know. We can't we talk about the unknown, and we can't live in fear, and, you know, we can sit every year at this and talk about not knowing, and, you know, I think at some point we have to, you know, we have to face it and move forward instead of trying to run away from it and create distance between us and what could happen.
I was gonna say that before Chris left, but I didn't have a chance to, is that, you know, the underlying assumption is SB2 is not gonna go away, and we're gonna have to face this for years and years. But maybe it's not as equally as likely, but another possible scenario is that this creates such a backlash for some of the bigger cities that it forces a change of government in our state. We get a different governor, and lieutenant governor, and maybe there's a, you know, the SB2 goes away. Maybe that's just like pie in the sky and overly optimistic, but it's certainly a non-zero probability.
And, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I also look at, you have people down in the state that have, you know, constituents that are looking for tax breaks and more money back in their pockets, and they're not gonna cut their own budgets, but who can we limit? And so they look to the cities that, you know, if you look at the large cities, you have a very Republican state. Those major cities are very Democratic. And, you know, whereas some of that balance of mindset and what can we do here and there, and, you know, in some areas, some of those cities, the costs just keep going up, the bill keeps going up, and, you know, what mechanisms were they able to put in place? But I do think that some of the opportunities in front of us and some of the merits of what many of y'all have said, here are things that need to be considered. I'm just looking at, from my point of view, just when I review what I've seen, you know, how I think our city has a little bit more opportunity than most, and what can we do to, you know, just make a more impactful stand. You know, what does it look like when everyone else is going up? We're going down, and we're doing it a little bit better, and we're still accomplishing all the things that we need to accomplish, which gets back to the idea of how do we get back to being a true leader, you know, in North Texas in terms of how things are run and operated.
I can't disagree with what you said. I would just say that holding the rate is, in some instances and in some people's mind, as good as lowering the rate, because it shows that we're being fiscally responsible. We're trying to live at that same level in some people's minds. But to Bronson's point, you know, our residents, they have the opportunity to speak. They approve trails. They approved economic development. They approved stationary development. That was their saying, and I get that, they want more development in this city, and they're willing to support that. But there will be another ask at some point. I don't know what that is right now, but we're going to come up with another project, I'm sure, or staff will, and they'll say, okay, how do we fund it? $5 million bond? Let's put it out there and see if they want to do it. And if it's a worthy project and we've done our job to sell the taxpayers on the benefits of it, then it should be an issue. But I just have, I'm really sort of mixed right now, but I don't ever want to discount that they don't have a say. I think the challenge is getting more people involved, more than anything else, and making sure people are in the know of what's going on, rather than saying we're giving them more of a voice. They have a voice. They need to use it. We need more of them.
Well, it's a nationwide epidemic.
Yes,
I mean,
it
if you
is.
look at the amount of people we got to come out for the library and some of the other stuff, I mean, that was one of the bigger turnouts we've had in a long time, which shows that
Second biggest election ever.
Huh?
Second biggest election ever. Period.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can kind of see that, you know, we've got some people's attention. And I think, you know, like I said, I'm telling you where I'm starting, where my mindset is. As you all know, I'm open to changing my mind and hearing valid arguments that make me think a different way. So I think, you know, starting at least this conversation, we all know where at least we all stand, and maybe some different things that we need to look at to evaluate what each, scenario, we know what staying at the rate is. We know what that scenario looks like, but what does it look like, with some of these other proposed changes? Should we make a cut? How will that impact us, and where would it come from, and what does that look like to truly give us an opportunity to look at it? And I think your comments, Mike, are very valid. The inverting of the rates, being pegged at, I think, 33% now, potential for recession within the next 2 years. And what does that look like? But then you also look at, what does a recession bring?
How insulated are we from a recession? Because you talk about what happened in 12 and 13 with the housing market and whatnot, and it didn't even really send ripples through the water in Texas, let alone hurricanes.
Yeah, I mean, a macro recession is different than the micro one here, and what does our situation look like to the rest of the country? With the number of people that are moving here and some of the things, the businesses, it's a little bit different. And why are people moving here? Why are businesses moving here? Because we're a low tax environment. We stay out of people's way, and we just kind of let them operate. You've seen the trend of people moving to those states. So is there that insulation factor? And that's kind of what we all need to evaluate over the next few weeks, because it is a valid concern, and who knows what's going to continue to happen on the macro level with the trade wars and some of these other things, and how that's going to impact us into the future, because you're starting to see the effects of that now. Not only in our country, but in other countries, which is creating some of that cause for the impacts in our country.
But the reality is, John and Jane Doe, who live next door to you, who don't necessarily vote because they haven't been interested enough, they're here for maybe the quality of life, whatnot. And so I would say, is the city better off 3 years, or now than it was 3 years ago when I started on council? I think that it is. We've certainly had a lot of development. Will it be better off 3 years from now when I'm off? I certainly hope so, because I don't want to go the other way. And I think each one of you say yes to those questions. You've been here a long time. And that's our job, is, we were elected to try to make sure that our city does move forward. I had sort of that same stance when I was HOA board president, making sure that our neighborhood, just our little neighborhood, was doing what it could to preserve, protect, and increase property values when we could, just by taking care of our own little infrastructure and our common areas. We're just doing it on a bigger level here. So, and obviously, the dollars are bigger, but the concerns are still the same, because nobody wanted their dues to go up. But the cost of business does go up, and it costs more today to take care of maintenance items than it did years ago, and I get that. But I want to, now that I've heard from department heads, I want to look back through again and see, okay, does this really make sense? Can something wait 6 months? Can it wait a year? Is it the right thing for the city? And most of what I've heard has been, because I don't think anybody's going to stand up here and tell us different.
Mike?
A 1 cent tax reduction is less than $20 per average household in Farmers Branch. It's not going to change anybody's life. It's not going to, what you're talking about is really just purely make you feel, it's make you feel good, right? But what we're losing is we're losing the business revenue. It's 4 to 1, and we'll spend more than that trying to, raise taxes in 3 years, right? It's or 5 years or whenever it will need to be done, because if we get hit with the recession affects more than just property values. It affects sales tax. It affects business, because it affects business investment. It'll increase the needs of our community from Metro, you know, because people will lose jobs and it has a trickle-down effect all the way through that will put more pressure on other services.
I hear you on that, and I think it's more than just symbolic. I think it sends a message that we as a city, this is a well-run city, because we were able to do 1 cent tax reduction when others, like what's Addison got proposed, a 4 cent.
They'll probably go 2, but yeah.
About that 2 cent, you know, and others are having to go up to have the same level of service that, have a worse level of service than we do. So I think it's more than just symbolic. I think it's something that I would like us to do, but we still got some time to play around. I'd like to see on the 20th the 3 scenarios. Keep it the same, the 1 cent, the 1.5 cent, and what where the cuts would come and rationale for that. Or did we just absorb it out of fund balance and have a nice day?
Not only that, I'd love to see, some of the ancillary effects of what do some of those cuts, how does that impact other things, and then maybe into the future, because I mean, you guys are going to know, okay, if we cut that now and do this, what does that else impact us?
I tell you, that'd be the library.
Yeah, well,
That more than covers it.
unless the library's too.
But that's not the only thing that could be cut.
Yeah, I mean,
No, it's not, and I don't necessarily know that that approach is what the residents said when they voted it down. I think they voted it down in an effort to send us back to the drawing board to see and have someone come in and tell us what we do need, what changes we could need, what does the future of a public facility like this look like. So I don't think they sent us back to not do anything. They want, obviously they would like to have some of the maintenance things taken care of, which they should be. But I don't think that they looked for us to turn around and start systematically and arbitrarily planning money that we don't know what the heck we use it for. Because that's kind of what that 777 was, well, we know it's going to cost something, but we don't know what it's going to cost. So, without having, another master plan or a planner come in and tell us and involve the residents and see what they want and what they need, do we really know what it's going to cost? I mean, we're talking about putting money away arbitrarily for 5 or 8 years before something could be done. That's a lot of money and a lot of time.
Well, you're always gonna have, air conditioning and roof, and the parking lot's debatable, but, library especially, the building gets a lot of use. It's gonna need maintenance on the inside. It may need some carpet, facelift, whatever, just like all of our other city buildings. Nothing says that the recreation center renovation couldn't wait. Sounds great, looked great. I'm buying in because of I know the number of people that use that facility, but if we didn't do anything for a year, are people gonna quit coming? I guess I would venture to say no. So there's some money there. So those are the things that I really feel like I need to wrestle with. And hopefully we can have some individual talks to really vet that stuff out further.
And do we want to be great or good, right? Do we want to have a couple of parks that are great? They're good now. But what is our vision? What is our vision for the rec center? How great do we want to have it? And that's a blessing for our citizens, And as we go through that, uplighting, whose idea was that? Uplighting, in the park, there's no money for that. Things like this are, a vision that makes our city not just good, but having, maybe it is an extra penny to provide great. Because at the end of the day, when we start squeezing budgets, we start looking for taking away the landscaping in the fire department, right? Difference between good and great. And we have to think about that. I think is what do we want Farmers Branch to be, as Crystal said, down the road. 10 years? Because those are the decisions we're making.
I mean, that's, I hear you when you think about the rec center, you know, we're not gonna know what that looks like in 2 weeks or
Yeah.
3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But,
But,
you
but
know,
if we say we don't need it, so let's cut the budget now, we're gonna need it next year. Then it's not gonna be
I
there.
just look at what a full,
Right?
you know, if it's a full makeover at the rec center, that's a bigger item than
Yeah, maybe
something we're
that's-
squirreling away. It's,
I already said maybe that
yeah,
needs to go to
yeah.
bond, so, you know, it's,
Yeah.
They're all,
But
these are all great.
bonds are more expensive than leaving the rate where it is.
You know, last night, I think I spent a few minutes at 1:30 this morning thinking about the idea of the park. And actually, I had the iPad out and I was looking at Farmers Branch Park in relation to Rawhide and just trying to see what's available. I like the idea of creating something big, a focal point in the city. But then I thought, okay, well, we sort of did that recently with the dog park, which is in the middle of the city, but then it's serving a limited audience. It's that focal point for people with dogs. Well, don't have a dog, so I'm probably never gonna go over there. I'm gonna go to rec center, but I'm not gonna go to the dog park. So what is it that we can do to create something for more families? And then I thought about, well, what about the McLaughlin School, not McLaughlin, Montgomery School area? Empty space, probably not big enough to do something. But it's in an area where there's other stuff going on. Might not be the right area. Some of our other parks are a little small. Orem Good, I think, it's known as an athletic facility. I wouldn't want to muddy the waters up over there with trying to make the, park of the decade, so to speak, because people are going there to play ball or whatnot. They're going there for a specific purpose. So I do think something like that could enhance our city and be an extremely nice amenity for residents and a place to go take kids. I love the idea of trying to tie it into Rawhide Park because I think it's close to the library and just that whole area just would seem to me to be like a kid haven. But and not necessarily trying to recreate what was part of the library bond, but
I mean, that's kind of the idea, right? The signature park is to dream that big and create something that we haven't had, whether it's at Rawhide, whether it's at Farmers Branch, or whether it's wherever. But I think, John brought up the point of we need to evaluate all the parks, and what needs to happen at Morningstar, what needs to happen at Squire, what needs to happen at Dutch Village, and, it's not all gonna be the same, but how do you create more use out of some of these parks that create a reason for people to go to each one? Because I think a lot of our parks right now, I can get the same amount of fun out of Morningstar as I can at Squire, it's just which one closer. But if there was something different at some of these other ones, what's gonna create people to go to some of these other places? But, I'm open to I think Rawhide is just as close to the rec center as Farmers Branch Park and some of the others, and everything there in the center of the city is so close. It's just figuring out what do we wanna do, where, and what does it look like, and I think that's where, we challenged Mike to come back and say, give us some practical stuff, give us some really good stuff, and then, as Mike said, give us a few of those the great stuff, and let's see what we want to do from there. Could we have town halls after that and say, what speaks to you? What inspires you? And, what do we need to be looking at? And like I said, I'm not hard and fast on what I proposed. I'm just telling you where I'm at today. Everyone has brought up some very valid points that, as you said, we all need to consider and have bigger discussions. And it's a good thing we have some time to have those discussions because we're going to need to have them. And I think it's where we're at right now is a great start for the next year. I'm very encouraged. I think we got some great projects think we've put together a fantastic budget. And it was exciting to hear from all the departments head about truly everything that is going on in our city that not a lot of people know about. And, you know, how do we get that message out and continue? And, I mean, unless anyone has anything more pressing to discuss, or if they want to discuss some other items, we can, or, you know, we can take a few minutes, wrap up, and
I'd like to make one comment.
Yeah.
One thing we don't do enough of is we don't do enough take enough time celebrating what we've accomplished. This has been a fantastic year. It's been a fantastic run for a few years. You know, and you know, we get caught up in these little, you know, micro debates about where we're at. And, you know, from my point of view, I'd like to thank the staff for everything. And we need to figure out how to celebrate our successes in a better way. Because they're great. And, you know, some of the residents don't even know the successes that are coming, right? That are, you know, 12 to 24 months down the road. So anyway, thank you.
That's appreciated.
also, you know, the time and energy for everyone popping out here for a few hours to show us a few things and then get back. I mean, it's not the easiest drive, but, you know, everyone providing this opportunity for us to come together and have a lot of these discussions, I think is beneficial for everyone, because we're a little bit more free. We have, I think, deeper conversations about what we want to get after. We don't feel the time constraints of a meeting, you know, beating down on us to be able to engage and think a little bit differently. And, you know, I'd second Mike's comments that, you know, the work the staff has done. I mean, I hope you know we all appreciate all that y'all do. Truly, it's remarkable. I mean,
echoing some of the things you said, and this wasn't everybody's in the community's first choice for council to go off-site, but it was the second year we did that, and I don't know how y'all felt about it, but I mean, I think from our standpoint, it allows us to focus, and being away takes away the temptation of being able to maybe make a meeting or it kind of helps you unplug a little bit. As we're, you know, looking at maybe continuing this, how do y'all feel about an off-site planning session like this? Is this something that's beneficial to you all, or would you prefer this to be in the community?
I think it's beneficial. I think getting away and being together is, you know, the dinners we had, the after dinner things, you know, the going out Camp Gladiator together. I mean, that kind of stuff just builds tighter, better relationships and maybe leads to conversations that you wouldn't have had in a more time compressed, you know. Well, we got to get out at 3 because I got to get over here to meet with Joe, or I got to get home to do something. So, you know, we're here, we're dedicated. This is sole focus is on the budget. And I know it's a long ways, and I've heard you know, well, why are you going there, you know, and you can't come to the meeting. And it's like, nobody would really want to come to the meeting anyway. And if they did, they should have gotten out here and
They come to our own meeting.
yeah. So, and we taped it, and people can see what was said, and no secrets, transparent. So I'm in favor of continuing to do it. I think it's a great venue.
I make a comment. I think it would be worthwhile at some point for everybody to go around the table, not today, but at some future meeting, and say, what is it? What are the 5 things that you want to accomplish? What's on your list? What's on your list? You know, because having been here for 3 years, 4 years, 4 years, you know, maybe some things have been checked off, maybe some new things have been added. I know some of my priorities have changed because of things that I've learned, new opportunities or new requests have been presented to me. And just maybe having one of these sessions, maybe taking, half a day or something, where we can sit around and just say, okay, these are things that are on my list. This is what I want to do as of today within the next 3 years. And you can say, well, okay, we'll make note of that, or that's not a good idea, or, whatever. But not necessarily to critique everybody, but just to know what's on everybody's mind. Because you might have something that's really of importance to you that I don't know about that could spark interest.
I hear you, but I think that's the whole thrust of the February meeting.
Well,
That we do, and and at that time we said, gotta get on top of this creek thing, and we got, and we wanna continue this development, and we wanna, and so it is, there's, so I hear you, and I think this, let's do that in February, that's the purpose of that meeting. Unless you think it has to happen here.
no, I didn't have to happen here. We can just do it sometime in Dallas, or, probably.
Well, I'm happy to do that.
When we're together, but I think things change, and, we work in a very fluid environment. And, like I said, I'm learning, continue to learn things that I didn't even know back in February. So.
I think it's a good idea, and I think that's what we tried to do with the strategy session last year. As we said, start with why video. Remember why you got into this, what you wanted to accomplish, what has changed, and we need to look at that as we look towards the future each year and say, these are important items for this year. If it doesn't make the list this year, hey, remember that and put that on next year. And it was great at that meeting. Bronson wasn't able to be there, but for the most part, everyone, shared why they originally got on council, what was their drive, and what were they looking to accomplish. It's where we learn, like you said, about some of the other ideas, and, without vocalizing those, how can we get on board with some of those, or at least think about them differently and how it might benefit the city. And,
I gotta say, I didn't ever obviously intend to miss those meetings, but I did, unfortunately. And I gotta tell you, it's been tough because I felt disconnected from some of it. I had no idea where those critical business, like y'all did the critical business outcomes, all of them. I'm like, well, okay, it's not that I disagree with them, but I didn't know how we got there. And then obviously having opportunities to have discussions like this, but it's obviously can't predict the future and whatnot, but it's tough to miss. And I think that having that meeting, I'm not saying having that out of town, but that could be helpful to do as well. And maybe not here, maybe somewhere, somewhere else, just because getting out here, although I did have to work the last day and a half, you try to limit that so you can stay involved and focused and invested in the conversations. So.
Anything else from anyone? Any comments?
Just thank y'all for having open discussions.
Yes,
And
great
it's invaluable, it really is. And without the support of council and the leadership of council, staff couldn't do what we do. So I just want to thank y'all as well. And I enjoy this opportunity. A lot of times when you see what happens in Washington and the dysfunction in Washington, and I've read stories, but part of the reason for that is because folks come into Washington, they can't afford to live there, and they go back home. So they don't have a chance to bond and kind of have conversations and get to know each other, and that's what I really enjoy about this venue is we have those opportunities, and I think have some really genuine conversations, and it's much appreciated.
Well, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. It's 1:22. Safe tracks home.
All right, thanks for.